If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to MINDSHOCK True Crime. Today we are tackling the Chris Benoit conspiracy. This has been requested many times on MINDSHOCK, and the first of many pro wrestling conspiracies we will cover in typical MINDSHOCK fashion, with logic and reason at the forefront, something no mainstream outlet is doing, and topics that are just too triggering for the mainstream. The authority-worshipping cultists that belong to the so-called masses, the NPCs out there, they simply cannot objectively and logically assess conspiracy theories, which is, of course, why MINDSHOCK exists, where the motto here is the only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. If you weren't present at a particular event, you don't really know what happened, do you? Amazing how many clueless goofs simply do not understand the basics of logic and reason. And if you don't have all of the information available, how would you even hallucinate or pretend to know what is more or less likely? In order to know true likelihoods, you have to have a certain amount of information that is simply not present in pretty much all conspiracy theories versus coincidence theories debates. As always, if you enjoy the MINDSHOCK podcast, you want to help support the podcast, help us get more mind-shocking content out there, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Like and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcast requests. You can also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, not suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. So, of course, the Chris Benoit saga, which ended very, very tragically with the alleged murder-suicide, with Benoit killing his family and then himself. That is the official story. I am not alleging it is true or untrue. We are simply going to look at the available information and attempt not to fall for any logical fallacies in our assessments here. So Chris Benoit was, of course, beloved by many fans before this tragic event. And some people really disagree with the WWE, formerly the WWF, as old-timers still know it by. Some die-hard pro wrestling fans believe that the golden era of pro wrestling ended pretty much, or at least the WWF, WWE, whatever, when they switched the name from WWF to WWE. But anyhow, Benoit was beloved. Many people enjoyed the exploits of the Canadian Crippler in the ring. He was pretty intense. He had a very unique style, and he had certainly a lot of fans, not only in Canada, but in the US and all over the world as well. So the dilemma that a certain moral dilemma comes into play, this guy who gave everything for pro wrestling, for him to be so-called erased from the history books, or at least from the WWE archives, is that fair given the possible brain damage he sustained? So if he did have some kind of CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, this is a form of brain damage. Now, the extent of the damage, we can debate that all day, but let's take Benoit and this specific situation out of the equation. Morally, someone with a certain amount of brain damage, how responsible are they for their actions? Because it's very easy to blame them for their actions, but if the brain damage is at a severe enough point where they do not even realize what they are doing, is that the same thing as someone without brain damage who's technically not clinically insane committing the same act? And should the penalties be the same? I am not claiming to have the answers here. I'm just asking the questions. So let's do a quick background on the Canadian Crippler, Christopher Michael Benoit, before we get into the details of the tragic murder-suicide and all of the conspiracy theories that have stemmed from that event. He was born May 21st, 1967, died June 24th, 2007. Allegedly, some believe there's also some timeline trickery. He was a Canadian professional wrestler, worked for numerous pro wrestling promotions during his 22-year career, most notably the World Wrestling Federation, World Wrestling Entertainment. World Championship Wrestling, and Extreme Championship Wrestling in America, as well as New Japan Pro Wrestling, NJPW, in Japan. Utilizing nicknames, the Canadian Crippler alongside the Rabid Wolverine throughout his career. Benoit held 22 championships between WWF and WCW, NJPW, and ECW. He was a two-time world champion, having been a one-time WCW World Heavyweight Champion and a one-time World Heavyweight Champion in WWE. He was booked to win a third World Championship at a WWE event on the night of his death. Benoit was the 12th WWE Triple Crown Champion and the 7th WCW Triple Crown Champion, and the second of four men in history to achieve both WWE and WCW Triple Crown Championships. He was also the 2004 Royal Rumble winner, joining Shawn Michaels and preceding Edge as one of the three men to win a Royal Rumble as the number one entrant. Benoit headlined multiple pay-per-views for WWE, including a victory in the World Heavyweight Championship main event match of WrestleMania 20 in March 2004. In a suspected double murder and suicide, local law enforcement officials concluded, based on evidence found within the Benoit family home, that Benoit had murdered his wife in their residence on June 22nd, 2007, had killed his 7-year-old son on June 23rd, and on June 24th had committed suicide, reportedly hanging himself using equipment in a weight training area inside the residency basement. Later research undertaken by the Sports Legacy Institute, now the Concussion Legacy Foundation, suggested that depression and CTE, a condition of brain damage from numerous concussions Benoit had sustained during his professional wrestling career, were both likely contributing factors of the tragedy. Due to his suspected murders, Benoit's legacy in the professional wrestling industry has remained incredibly controversial and heavily debated. In spite of the assumed crimes, Benoit has been universally renowned by many for his exceptional technical wrestling ability. Prominent combat sports journalist Dave Meltzer considered Benoit one of the top 10, maybe even top 5 all-time greats in pro wrestling history. Benoit was inducted into the Stampede Wrestling Hall of Fame in 1995 and the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame in 2003. Benoit's WON induction was put to a referendum-style revote for WN readers in 2008, a year after the tragedy, to determine if Benoit should remain a member of the WON Hall of Fame or be removed. Ultimately, the threshold percentage of votes required to remove Benoit, set by the WON staff, was not met, and so Benoit still remains in that Hall of Fame. Final appearances in 2007. On the June 11th episode of Raw, Benoit was drafted from SmackDown to ECW as part of the 2007 WWE draft after losing to ECW World Champion Bobby Lashley. On June 19th, Benoit wrestled his final match, defeating Elijah Burke in a match to determine who would compete for the vacated ECW World Championship at Vengeance on June 24th. Since Lashley was drafted to Raw, he had vacated the title. Benoit missed the weekend house shows, telling WWE officials that his wife and son were vomiting blood due to food poisoning. When he failed to show up for the pay-per-view, viewers were informed that he was unable to compete due to a family emergency, and he was replaced in the title match by Johnny Nitro, who won the match and became ECW World Champion. The crowd spent the majority of the match chanting for Benoit. WWE executive Stephanie McMahon later indicated that Benoit would have defeated CM Punk for the ECW World Championship had he been present for the event. Professional wrestler and MMA fighter Bob Sapp, whom WWE had tried to sign up before a contract dispute with K1 rendered it impossible, reported he would have been put into an oncoming angle with Benoit in case he would have been able to debut. Interesting. Personal life. Benoit spoke both English and French fluently. He married twice. He had 2 children with his first wife. By 1997, that marriage had broken down, and Benoit was living with Nancy Sullivan, the wife of WCW booker and frequent opponent Kevin Sullivan. On February 25, 2000, Chris and Nancy's son Daniel was born. On November 23, 2000, Chris and Nancy married. It was Nancy's third marriage. In 2003, Nancy filed for divorce from Benoit, citing the marriage as irrevocably broken and alleging cruel treatment. She claimed he would break and throw furniture around. She later dropped the suit as well as the restraining order she had filed. Interesting. Alright, so let's get to the details of the actual crime. So this is the official story from the wiki. Over a 3-day period from June 22nd to June 24th, 2007, Chris Benoit, a 40-year-old Canadian professional wrestler employed by World Wrestling Entertainment and living in Fayetteville, Georgia, murdered his wife, Nancy, and their 7-year-old son, Daniel, before hanging himself. Autopsy results showed that Benoit's wife was murdered first as she was bound at the feet and wrists and died of asphyxiation on the night of June 22nd. On June 25th, Nancy was found wrapped in a towel with blood under her head, although Fayette County DA Scott Ballard reported no other signs of a struggle. The couple's son, Daniel Christopher Benoit, who also died of asphyxia, was killed as he was lying sedated in his bed on the morning of June 23rd. Then, on the evening of the 24th, Benoit killed himself in his weight room, where he used his lat pull-down machine to hang himself. He placed Bibles near the bodies of his wife and son. Since Benoit's suicide, numerous explanations for his actions have been proposed, including severe chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, steroid and alcohol abuse, leading to a failing marriage and other personal problems. The incident led to numerous media accounts and a federal investigation into steroid abuse in professional wrestling. Murders and suicide. Nancy Benoit. Friday, June 22nd, 2007, Chris Benoit killed his wife Nancy in an upstairs bedroom. Her limbs were bound and her body was wrapped in a towel. A copy of the Bible was left by her body. Injuries indicated that Benoit had pressed a knee into her back while pulling on a cord around her neck, causing strangulation. Officials said that there were no signs of immediate struggle. Toxicologists found alcohol in her body but were unable to determine whether it had been present before her death or was a decomposition product. Decomposition also made it difficult to estimate pre-death levels of hydrocodone and alprazolam found in therapeutic levels in her body. In any case, her medical examiner saw no evidence that she was sedated as her son had been when he was killed. Daniel Benoit. Daniel Christopher Benoit was Chris's third child, second son, after having older paternal half-siblings named David and Megan via Chris's first wife, who were all living in Canada at the time the murder-suicide took place. He was Nancy's only child, as she had no children with her ex-husbands. Daniel was suffocated and killed in his bedroom, and a copy of the Bible was left by his body. Daniel had internal injuries to the throat area, showing no bruises. Daniel's exact time of death is unknown. The reports determined Daniel was sedated with Xanax and likely unconscious when he was killed. Daniel's body had also just started to show signs of decomposition, but was not as far along as his mother's body. It was later alleged that Daniel had Fragile X syndrome, and that this was the cause of domestic problems in the Benoit family. Fragile X syndrome is a genetic disorder characterized by mild to moderate intellectual disability. It was also suggested that the needle marks on Daniel's arms were the result of growth hormones given to him because Benoit and his family considered him undersized due to Fragile X. Benoit's co-worker and best friend, wrestler Chris Jericho, stated that from his own research on the condition, the symptoms fit Daniel to a T all across the board. Concerning those who had publicly stated they had no knowledge of Daniel having the condition, Jericho said if Chris had decided that he wanted to keep it to himself, you wouldn't have been able to pry that out of him with anything. Despite Chris Jericho's initial statements regarding Daniel, he later stated in his 2011 book Undisputed, it turned out that Daniel didn't have Fragile X, but at the time it made sense because I was grasping at straws. Interesting. Chris Jericho's also spoken about this on his podcast, I believe. District Attorney Ballard later released a statement saying that a source with access to Daniel's medical files found no mention of any pre-existing mental or physical ailments, Likewise, Daniel Benoit's teachers reported that he was on par with other students and not about to be held back as previously thought. Speaking publicly for the first time in a major public interview on Talk is Jericho podcast in 2016, Nancy's sister, Sandra Toffolini, unequivocally denied any claims that Daniel had ever had Fragile X or any other such condition. She also stated that the claims of needle track marks on Daniel's arms were preposterous. I mean, I'm assuming all of that is clearly known by some people. I mean, that would clearly be noted on any kind of autopsy. After the murders, at about 3:30 p.m. on Saturday, June 23, 2007, fellow wrestler and close friend Chavo Guerrero received a voicemail message from Benoit's phone stating that both Nancy and Daniel had food poisoning and he would be late for that night's house show in Beaumont, Texas. Guerrero called Benoit back and found that Benoit sounded tired and groggy as he confirmed everything that he had said in his voice message. Guerrero, who was concerned about Benoit's tone and demeanor, because theoretically this would be after Nancy and Daniel are dead, called him back 12 minutes later. Benoit did not answer the call, and Guerrero left a message asking Benoit to call back. At 3:44 p.m., Benoit called Guerrero back, stating that he had not answered the call because he was on the phone with Delta Airlines changing his flight. Benoit stated that he had a stressful day due to Nancy and Daniel being sick from food poisoning. Guerrero then replied with, "All right, man, if you need to talk, I'm here for you." Benoit ended the conversation by saying, "Chavo, I love you." During a 2014 appearance on Chris Jericho's Talk is Jericho podcast, Guerrero said Benoit sounded off when he talked to him, especially when he said, "I love you," with emphasis. Another coworker who often traveled with Benoit called him from outside the Houston airport. Benoit answered and told the coworker that Nancy was vomiting blood and that Daniel was also vomiting. Benoit failed to show up for the house show in Beaumont and left a voicemail on Chavo Guerrero's cell phone that he would be on a flight that would arrive in Houston at 8 a.m. on the following Sunday morning. During this time, Benoit also called and left a voicemail for an unknown friend. Wait, how is that friend still unknown? I guess they didn't want to come forward, but the details of that voicemail could have still been revealed even without revealing that person. Curious. On Sunday, June 24th, 2007, 5 text messages were sent to coworkers between 3:51 a.m. and 3:58 a.m. using both Chris and Nancy Benoit's cell phones. 4 of them were the Benoit's address. The 5th said that the family's dogs were in the enclosed pool area and also noted that a garage side door had been left open. Guerrero and referee Scott Armstrong were 2 of the recipients of these texts. Chavo Guerrero was woken up by the texts and went back to sleep, telling himself that he would be picking up Benoit at the Houston airport in a few hours. Benoit failed to show at Houston airport on the flight that arrived at 8 a.m. Late Sunday morning, Benoit called WWE's Talent Relations office, stating that his son was vomiting and that he and Nancy were at the hospital with him. He also stated that he would be taking a later flight into Houston, where he was scheduled to face CM Punk for the vacant ECW World Championship at Vengeance Night of Champions. Benoit failed to appear for the Vengeance Night of Champions pay-per-view event in Houston on the night of Sunday, June 24th. Chris Benoit, according to the DA Ballard and the city sheriff, committed suicide by hanging. Benoit used a weight machine cord to hang himself by creating a noose from the end of the cord on a pull-down machine from which the bar had been removed. Benoit released the weights, causing his strangulation. Ballard said Benoit was found hanging from the pulley cable. You know what else is curious? I would like to know how many people have committed suicide in this fashion. On the 2016 Talk is Jericho podcast, Nancy's sister, Sandra Toffolini, clarified some details further. She said that over the weekend, the search history on Benoit's computer showed that he had researched, quote, "the quickest and easiest way to break a neck," end quote. He had then later used a towel around his neck attached to the handle of the machine, which he pulled down using a very heavy weight and let go, breaking his neck instantly. I mean, he's got a really thick, muscular neck, too, so, I mean, that must have taken a lot of weight. See, now when you Google the quickest way The quickest and easiest way to break a neck, the only thing that comes up is everything Chris Benoit, that he searched it. So yeah, I don't know if there are stats on people who've committed suicide using a pull-down weight machine. Discovery of the bodies. Monday, June 25th, 2007, WWE wrestlers and senior officials arrived in Corpus Christi for WWE Raw, which was set to take place on the Monday night at the American Bank Center. As the early hours of the afternoon progressed and the show got closer to starting, WWE senior officials were increasingly concerned that they had not heard from Chris Benoit in over 24 hours. Chavo Guerrero then showed WWE Vice President of Talent Relations John Laurinaitis, aka Johnny Ace, the text that he and Scott Armstrong had received from Chris and Nancy's cell phones in the early hours of Sunday. As more time progressed without any contact from Benoit, WWE called the Fayetteville, Georgia police for a welfare check at the Benoit household. After discovering the bodies, the police notified WWE around 4:15 p.m., informing them that they had discovered 3 bodies at the Benoit home, and the house was now ruled as a major crime scene. A suicide note was not discovered during the initial investigation, but one was later discovered in a Bible that had been among Benoit's possessions that were sent to his first wife and their 2 children in Canada. Benoit's father, Michael Benoit, stated that Chris had left a handwritten notation in there saying, "I'm preparing to leave this earth." Memorial and cremation. Memorial for Nancy and Daniel took place in Daytona Beach, Florida, July 14, 2007. Both were cremated and their ashes placed in starfish-shaped urns for Nancy's family. Chris was also cremated. Following a private memorial service in Ardrossan, Alberta on August 6, 2007, but the fate of his ashes have not been publicly revealed. Okay. Possible motives. WWE attorney Jerry McDevitt appeared on Live with Dan Abrams July 17, 2007, and said Benoit was prescribed testosterone as part of a treatment for testosterone replacement therapy, which McDevitt said was a common practice for people who had used steroids in the past and had suffered testicular damage as a result. Former wrestler Christopher Nowinski stated that Benoit may have been suffering from repeated untreated concussions throughout his wrestling career, ultimately leading to an unstable mental state. Nowinski was quoted as saying that Benoit was one of the only guys who could take a chair shot to the back of the head, which is stupid. Tests conducted on Benoit's brain by Julian Bales, the head of neurosurgery at West Virginia University, showed Benoit's brain was so severely damaged it resembled the brain of an 85-year-old Alzheimer's patient. Other tests conducted on Benoit's brain tissue revealed severe chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, and damage to all 4 lobes of the brain and brainstem. I mean, wow, that sounds pretty extensive. That sounds extremely extensive, not minor in any way. Bales and his colleagues concluded that repeated concussions can lead to dementia, which can contribute to severe behavioral problems. Benoit's father said that the brain damage may have been the leading cause of the double murder-suicide. A statement released by WWE described this as speculative. If his brain looks like the brain of an 85-year-old Alzheimer's patient, how speculative is that? Nancy Benoit filed for divorce in May 2003, allegedly after domestic abuse from Chris, but had it withdrawn in August 2003. In February 2008, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reported that Nancy may have suspected her husband of having an affair with a female WWE wrestler, and that they may have also argued over a life insurance policy. The AJC claimed that the source was a recently released report from the Fayette County Sheriff's Office. So the initial response from the WWE was, what was this? This was Vince McMahon opening Raw 3-hour tribute to one of the greatest WWE superstars of all time. Tonight will be a tribute to Chris Benoit. So apparently this was in response to Chris Benoit, his wife Nancy, and their son Daniel being dead. And that was all the information that was available at that time. Now, coincidentally, the coincidences are stacking here. After Vince McMahon had gathered the wrestlers together to tell them that Chris, Nancy, and Daniel had all died, WWE canceled the scheduled 3-hour-long live show that had been scheduled for a few hours later on the night of the 25th, June 25th, which coincidentally was supposed to be a memorial for the Mr. McMahon character who on the June 11th episode of Raw died, in quotations, in a limo explosion. So in the last hour of the 3-hour tribute program, reports surfaced that Chris, Nancy, and Daniel had all died on different days over the weekend and that the police were not looking for any other suspects, working under the belief that Chris Benoit murdered his wife and son before killing himself. The next night, Tuesday, June 26, 2007, after details of the murder-suicide became available, the company aired a recorded statement by Vince McMahon before its ECW broadcast. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Last night on Monday Night Raw, the WWE presented a special tribute show recognizing the career of Chris Benoit. However, now, some 26 hours later, the facts of this horrific tragedy are now apparent. Therefore, other than my comments, there will be no mention of Mr. Benoit's name tonight. On the contrary, tonight's show will be dedicated to everyone who has been affected by this terrible incident. This evening marks the first step of the healing process. Tonight, WWE performers will do what they do better than anyone else in the world: entertain you. On Friday, June 29, 2007, before the SmackDown edition of that week, Vince McMahon released another statement indicating that the related events of the tragedy were not known at the time. The rest of the statement remained the same as the first one. On a recent edition of Raw, the WWE presented a special tribute show recognizing the career of Chris Benoit. However, the facts of this horrific tragedy involving Chris Benoit were not known at the time. Therefore, other than my comments, there will be no mention of Mr. Benoit's name in this program. On the contrary, this show is dedicated to everyone who has been affected by this terrible incident. This marks the first step of the healing process whereby WWE performers will now do what they do better than anyone else in the world: entertain you. After learning about the full details of his and his family's deaths, WWE quickly distanced itself from Chris Benoit. Except for his results and listings in WWE's title history, although the summaries of his title reigns have been removed, and select press releases from WWE's corporate site, the WWE website removed all past mentions of Benoit, including all news articles related to the specific details of the incident, as well as his biography and the video tribute comments from Benoit's peers. So here's where the problems arise. Like, let's say he didn't have brain damage. Should he still be completely erased? I mean, these are because he still accomplished what he accomplished and still entertained everyone he entertained. I mean, is erasing Adolf Hitler from the history books, would that be a service or a disservice? I mean, again, I don't claim to have the answers here. I'm just asking the questions. Toxicology results. At the press conference held by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation on July 17, 2007, it was announced that 3 different drugs were found in Nancy Benoit's system: hydrocodone, hydromorphone, and Xanax. All 3 drugs were found to be at levels investigators considered normal for therapeutic treatment as opposed to recreational use or abuse. A blood alcohol level was found to be 0.184. Chris Sperry, the medical examiner, added it was impossible to say whether any of the blood findings were due to ingestion of alcohol or the post-mortem process. It was also ruled out that Nancy was sedated by Chris before she was murdered. Xanax was found in Daniel Benoit's system. DA Scott Ballard noted that this was not a drug that would be given to a child under normal circumstances. It is believed that Daniel was sedated before being murdered, with Sperry ruling out that Daniel died of a drug overdose. The GBI, however, said in the press conference that it could not perform tests for steroids or growth hormones on Daniel because of a lack of urine. Xanax and hydrocodone were also found in Chris Benoit's system at levels investigators called consistent with therapeutic use. Elevated levels of the synthetic anabolic steroid testosterone cypionate were found in his urine. Investigators believe that the level suggested it had been taken recently. While the synthetic anabolic steroid testosterone cypionate was found in his urine, there was no evidence of GHB, contrary to speculation. Benoit also tested negative for blood alcohol. Drug charges against Benoit's doctor. Phil C. Austin was the personal doctor for Chris Benoit. His attorney, Manny Aurora, asked the judge to throw out evidence seized during a raid on Aston's office after Benoit and his family died. He claimed the search exceeded authority granted in a search warrant that police seized other patients' records and 3 years of bank records and computers. According to the Associated Press in February 2008, Aston was charged with overprescribing medication in a case not connected to Benoit. On January 29, 2009, he admitted he illegally prescribed drugs, sometimes without examining the patients first, and pled guilty to all 175 counts against him. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Wikipedia controversy. Now here we're going to go into conspiracy land. A statement regarding Nancy Benoit's death was added to the Chris Benoit Wikipedia article 14 hours before police discovered the bodies of Benoit and his family. This seemingly prescient addition was initially reported on Wikinews and later on Fox News. The article originally read, Chris Benoit was replaced by Johnny Nitro for the ECW World Championship match at Vengeance, as Benoit was not there due to personal issues stemming from the death of his wife Nancy. The phrase stemming from the death of his wife Nancy was added at 4:01 a.m., June 25th, whereas the Fayette County Police reportedly discovered the bodies of the Benoit family at 2:30 p.m., 10 hours, 29 minutes later. The IP address of the editor was traced to Stamford, Connecticut, which is also the location of WWE headquarters. What a coinky-dink. After news of early death notice reached mainstream media, the anonymous poster accessed Wikinews to explain his edit as, quote, a huge coincidence and nothing more, end quote. Man, the coincidence theorist going hard right off the bat here. Police detectives seized computer equipment from the man responsible for the postings and called the posting an unbelievable hindrance to their investigation, but believed he was otherwise uninvolved, declining to press charges. The man had found several rumors online which supported his theory about the Benoit family emergency as reported in Wrestling News. The IP from which he made the edit was tentatively traced to vandalizing the Wikipedia entries for African Wild Ass, The Bronx, The Sopranos, Ron Artest, Stacy Keebler, and Naugatuck, Connecticut. He also reverted vandalism to Chavo Guerrero Jr. and recorded a loss for the Golden State Warriors. Kind of random. Aftermath and legacy. In the years following the double murder and suicide, it continued to be referred to in the media. The Great American Bash pay-per-view on July 20th, 2008 was the last WWE pay-per-view with a TV 14 rating. WWE immediately thereafter adopted their current TV PG rating, which resulted in a noticeable toning down of edgy content in shows. Within a few months, blood was severely toned down, which returned WWE's product to its pre-97 rule on prohibiting deliberate blading in matches. So accidental blading, I guess, is okay. So, a lot to unpack there. So, before we get into all the different conspiracy theories, again, I'm not saying this specific to the Benoit case, but in history, there have been people framed for murder. So, again, theoretically, if someone is trying to frame someone for murder, can it be set up in a particular way? And just keep that in mind when looking at any so-called murder-suicides. Again, I am not saying Chris Benoit is innocent or guilty. I am not saying certain evidence is legitimate or not legitimate. We are objectively analyzing the information here. Is it possible everything is as advertised in the official theory? Of course. Is it possible it's not? Of course. How would we know if we weren't there? That's the thing, we wouldn't. So is it beyond the realm of possibility that someone framed Benoit, or are we just involved in some kind of false dichotomy here? Is it possible Benoit did kill himself and not his wife and child, and he killed himself after they died? Is it possible Benoit was responsible somewhat, but there was also another party who was also responsible that we don't know about? I mean, there are so many variables. Again, I'm not alleging any of them are true or untrue. A lot of the triggered goofs that listen to MINDSHOCK, they just get triggered instantly if I don't toe the propaganda line and just say everything is as reported on the idiot box. It is gospel, can never be questioned. Obviously, this is MINDSHOCK, where logic and reason are at the forefront, not blind faith in the cult of authority worship. So here's an interesting post from the Squared Circle subreddit. 7 years ago, by Newport Box 100S, 24 reasons that Chris Benoit may be innocent. 1. Chavo Guerrero, a close friend of Benoit, told WWE Magazine that he talked to Chris for a while on Friday night on his house phone. About 45 minutes into the conversation, Chris told him that there was somebody knocking at his door and he was going to see who it was. Shortly after Chris answered the door, there was a scuffle and then his house phone line went dead. Chris could only be reached on his cell phone about 3 hours later. This is very significant. This explains why there was no forced entry. Chris let the killer or killers in. Now again, let's just take a pause and a step back. This is not Chris Benoit is not a random nobody. This is a very famous celebrity, so to speak, in the world of sports entertainment. If somebody did want to either rob his house or cause some kind of ransom, hostage, kidnapping situation of some kind, and they're holding a gun to his to one of his family members' heads, what is he going to do? He's going to do whatever they say to do. Again, I'm not saying this happened in any way. I am not saying there's any definitive evidence this is what happened. But if it happened, would it explain the result? 2. After Chavo reached Chris on his cell phone, he said that Chris sounded very odd, groggy, and tired. He also said that Chris told him, "I love you, Chavo," which sounded forced. The WWE also said that when Chris called in and told them that Nancy and Daniel were sick, he did not sound like himself. He sounded groggy. Chris then said, "I love you," which they say was out of context because he usually didn't say this. 3. Chris Benoit's cell phone is missing. The police cannot find his cell phone or the needles they say Chris used to inject himself with steroids shortly before he died. The police have turned his cell phone off. Wait, what? The police turned his phone off if they don't have his phone? Again, I'm not claiming any of these points here are true or untrue. 4. Chris was not hanging from the weight machine. He was lying on the floor underneath the machine. Another officer said that Benoit was slumped against the weight machine. 5. There was a white cloth wrapped around Chris's neck. If he was so suicidal, why would he care if his neck was bruised? 6. The medical examiner says that Benoit died on Saturday. The text messages were sent Sunday. Chris was already dead, so who sent the text messages? It is noted that nobody talked to Chris on Sunday. 7. The steroids found in Chris's house were not in his body. I'm not sure what he's getting at there. 8. If Chris had murdered his family, why did he need to text people? Think about it. Everybody was dead. Nobody would hear him talking, so why text? Calling would have been easier. I believe the killer texted Benoit's address to get somebody to come to the house to find the bodies. But why would they do that either? I don't know. 9. Chris sent Chavo a text message telling him his address. Why would he do this? Chavo already knew where Chris lived. He spent the previous weekend with him. I mean, these are all good points. Although, conversely, if Benoit is in this advanced stage of dementia at this point, perhaps he had another head injury at the house. Maybe he just slipped, bumped his head, and that made everything a lot worse. And at that point, he was no longer thinking clearly. Or is it possible burglars were breaking into his house and he had a head injury at that time, and he may or may not have killed Nancy or his son? Maybe the burglars did it. Who knows? And then maybe he killed himself, or maybe it was staged to look like a suicide. Because again, suicidal people are not magically exempt from the world of crime. A lot of coincidence theorists maintain that, okay, he had this letter saying he's prepared to leave this earth. Okay, so let's say Benoit is planning suicide for however many weeks or months. Does that magically make him immune from any violent encounters with criminals? Do criminals know which people are suicidal and not suicidal and specifically don't target them? Is there a magic Dungeons and Dragons protection spell against suicidal people in the universe? This is something coincidence theorists just really have a hard time with. I mean, this is basic logic, people. 10. Chris's body was badly decomposed, about the same as Nancy's. This shows he died sooner than Sunday. Again, I'm not getting I don't know where he's getting this information from. 11, why would he tie up Nancy to kill her? He was a big guy. He could have just hit her one good time and she would have been out. I mean, that's an interesting point as well. But again, if it was the dementia, and who knows how he would have done it if he wanted to, if he actually did do it. 12. Ray also told me that the world press is reporting the manner of the deaths wrong. He says that Daniel was shot in his head and Nancy was shot in her chest. Okay, so now we're getting into a cover-up, if that is true. 13. Chavo said that Chris Benoit seemed worried about something, but he could not get Chris to open up and tell him why he was worried. Again, that's a neither here nor there situation, because if he is planning to kill his family and himself, he probably would be kind of off and worried. And then again, if somebody was holding his family hostage or whatever the situation was, of course he'd be worried in that situation as well. So simply being worried, I mean, that's not enough to know what happened about anything. 14, there was no Bible beside Chris's body. Why would he place a Bible beside Nancy and Daniel and not place one beside his own if he knew he was about to take his own life? Well, the clear answer there is suicide is a sin, whereas getting murdered is beyond your control. So I don't know, perhaps that's an easy explanation there. 15, there were 10 empty beer cans and an empty bottle of wine beside Chris's body. He tested negative for alcohol. Again, I don't know how much can be made of that. Did they DNA test the cans? Because if they already believed he did it, did they actually not DNA and fingerprint test the entire house? Because if this was a burglar step, I mean, obviously they could have been wearing gloves and possibly not left DNA, but did they at least go through the motions of a legitimate investigation? I don't know if there are details on that. Because if it is Benoit's DNA on the beer cans, then he simply could have drank them days earlier and not bothered to clean them up. But if it's somebody else's DNA on those bottles and beer cans, I mean, that's curious. That would definitely be curious. Although, I mean, yeah, it's hard. 16, the toxicology confirmed that Chris had hydrocodone, a painkiller, Xanax, an anti-anxiety drug. I have used both of these. These two drugs combined will sedate Chris and make him very sleepy, so he could not fight back. 17, the police originally said that Daniel died on Friday because his body was badly decomposing. This supports my belief that all three died on Friday night. The police changed the manner of Daniel's death 3 times. First, he died from a garbage bag. Second, he died from a chokehold. Third, he was smothered by a pillow. Why would they keep changing? Well, I mean, incompetent police could also address that, or simply competent but differing opinions on autopsies. I don't know. 18, the police kept changing the location of where Nancy's body was found. First, she was found in the downstairs family room. Second, she was found in the upstairs bedroom. Third, she was found in the house office. That's curious. I mean, could these have not been the police, but possibly just erroneous statements passed on through the media? Broken telephone, so to speak? I mean, again, it is curious. I mean, if there were 3 changes, that's kind of a lot. 19, Chris's father said that Chris called him on Father's Day and told him that he wished he could spend more time with his family, but he had to work. One of Nancy's friends said that Nancy loved Chris and she had no plans to leave him. Again, none of this really proves anything about anything. 20, retired wrestler Bam Bam Bigelow died January 19th, 2007. Sherry Martel died June 15th, 2007. The Benoit family died June 22nd, 2007. Since the family died, 2 other wrestlers have died, Brian Adams and Johnny Crush, in July and August 2007. Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, and Brian Pillman all died the night before they were set to win title belts. Okay, interesting. And Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero were best friends as well. Sherry Martel's death is even more suspicious to me. Sherry Martel had ties to Nancy Benoit's ex-husband, Kevin Sullivan. The circumstances surrounding her death have never been released. I mean, this is shaping up to be quite a web. Quite a web indeed. 21. Kevin Sullivan told Chris Benoit that he would kill him. Kevin is currently a high-ranking member of a satanic cult. He is also on the WWE board of directors. Sullivan also had motive to kill Daniel Benoit because he was Chris and Nancy's offspring. Retired wrestler Dusty Rhodes said that he danced with the devil when working with Sullivan, who is known as being cold-hearted and conniving. The Benoit family was murdered on the 10-year anniversary of Nancy's divorce from Sullivan. Okay, all right, the coincidence stack is getting kind of high now. Getting kind of high. If that's true, I mean, that would be an interesting. That's 1/365th chance that I mean, and 10 is a round. I mean, that's a pretty round number as well. I mean, the stack, and we're gonna get back to Sullivan in a moment here, but continue on with these points. 22. Nancy's Benoit's death was posted on the internet 14 hours before her body was found. 23. Weeks before he died, Benoit's colleagues said that Chris began taking alternate routes to and from work and back to his house. Chris and Nancy believed that somebody was following them. Chris's friends dismissed his worries as paranoia. Okay, I would like more information about this. So here's the thing about all these coincidences. By itself, any one of these coincidences, okay, that's not much to look at, whatever. But when you have all of these coincidences, I'm not saying there's anything to them or that Benoit is innocent in any way. I'm not claiming that. I'm not claiming he's guilty or innocent. I'm just saying when you have this many coincidences, all that at least merits an investigation into other avenues. That's all I'm saying. If for nothing else, then to confirm the conclusion that Benoit is guilty, just to rule out all the other possibilities. Now, did police really investigate Sullivan? Now, again, I don't have this information. I don't know whether they did or didn't. But if they are sure that Benoit is guilty, I mean, obviously, it's easier just to close that case. It's a murder-suicide, bam, bam, done. There's no need to go digging and interviewing all of Benoit's colleagues about how him and Nancy think that somebody's following them and that all of these things. There's no reason to go down those rabbit holes when you're 100% convinced he did it. Now, obviously, the police's job is to do objective, logical, neutral investigation. But how often does that really happen? And did they investigate thoroughly? I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't. Maybe they did, but I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't because in a lot of cases, they simply don't. 24.24 here, the Benoit family was murdered the same week that the WWE had a storyline of who killed Vince McMahon, the head of the whole company. So for those that believe in like these really crazy Illuminati conspiracy theories, and by crazy, I don't mean untrue, let's not fall for all these ad hominem or appeal to incredulity logical fallacies. It might be true, but it just seems, I mean, there's a lot here to unpack. But if there is a plot, see, pro wrestling itself, I'd have to do a dedicated episode on this, but the amount of predictive programming in pro wrestling, I mean, everything from the New World Order to the so-called 9/11 predictions with Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage talking about the Twin Towers coming crumbling down, the Twin Towers tag team, Akeem and the Big Boss Man. This is the Gene Okerlund interview that I'm sure most pro wrestling fans know about. I mean, it's just uncanny, the level of coincidences. If these are simply coincidences. I'm not going to get into that, but billionaire Vince McMahon, clearly, if he is dialed in to the New World Order or the Illuminati in some capacity, then the plot to eliminate Chris Benoit and his family, for whatever reason, let's not get into motives here. If you walk into a room with dead bodies, the first thing on your mind is not motive. You examine the evidence. Hallucinating, you would know the motive, even if there was a good one. Clearly, and these high-level, this is something coincidence theorists are just so clueless about. I mean, the Dunning-Kruger here is off the charts. If there is a top-secret motive, how could that motive ever be revealed? Because if there was a good enough reason to perpetrate the conspiracy, why would the reason be publicly available? Wouldn't that defeat the whole purpose of the conspiracy in the first place? So if there is a conspiracy, I'm not alleging there is, but if there is one, the motive might not be so easily and publicly available. Or, conversely, motives could be presented that the coincidence theorists would just brush off as silly or with appeal to incredulity logical fallacies where they wouldn't believe the motive presented even if it was the true motive, if the conspiracy is true. Someone else posted this, that it just happened to be a different Kevin Sullivan that's on the WWE board of directors. I mean, that by itself would be a gigantic coincidence. Okay, so apparently it looks like Kevin Sullivan, that is a different Kevin Sullivan. Okay. Wow, we're going down the Sullivan rabbit holes. So there is a producer named Kevin Sullivan. Supposedly this is not the pro wrestler Kevin Sullivan that Nancy Benoit was married to. But all the coincidence theorists out there, get a load of this. This is from the Sportster.com. This was published November 24th, 2021. Kevin Sullivan had one of the weirdest careers in wrestling history. Kevin Sullivan's Prince of Darkness gimmick was groundbreaking and led to real-life drama that wrapped up one of the weirdest wrestling careers ever. Kevin Sullivan had a long career. He worked for many promotions and played many characters. His career had quite a few strange turns inside and outside of the ring, which could put him in the position of having the weirdest career of any wrestler ever. Kevin Sullivan as the Prince of Darkness. Sullivan was a territory journeyman and NWA mainstay for many years before he hit his stride in Championship Wrestling, a Florida-based territory portraying the character of the Prince of Darkness. As this character, Sullivan was able to tap into society's fear of Satanism, witchcraft, and the occult in a way which wrestling had never seen before. It helped that the 80s was the peak of this paranoia with the popular tabletop game Dungeons & Dragons causing quite a stir amongst some religious groups. Sullivan was one of the few who was able to cash in on the trends of the time. Wrestling in the Southern Bible Belt region, Sullivan was able to antagonize a fairly religious audience with his Army of Darkness faction, which included superstar Billy Graham, the fallen angel, Nancy Benoit. Wow. The Lock, Winona Littleheart, and Sir Oliver Humperdinck. His faction would attack the psyche of his opponents, leaving audiences bewildered and uncomfortable. In his article, When Wrestling Went Metal, Benjamin Welton says, during their heyday, Sullivan's cult came to the ring and a series of black-cloaked and corpse-painted minions who usually brought with them boa constrictors of varying colors and sizes. Add in a half-naked fallen angel, who was Nancy Benoit, and then you've got a good idea of just how much of a spectacle Sullivan's Army of Darkness was. If you watch any of Sullivan's matches from 1982 until 1988, you can see them in the audience booing or threatening to beat the spirit of the Lord into Sullivan's ungodly Yankee body. This guy's a good writer. For the Army of Darkness, this was proof positive that the gimmick was working. For the audience, the Army of Darkness was proof positive that the world, or at least Florida, was going straight to hell. If you were a child in the 80s, it was something you didn't want your parents to catch you watching. In a shoot interview with Kayfabe Memories, Sullivan admitted he wanted the boys in the back to be convinced he was a real devil worshiper, thinking that if he could convince them, he will get even more over with audiences at the shows. The success of the Army of Darkness led to his career in WCW. Sullivan altered his character to become the Taskmaster, adapting to the less edgy, more family-friendly style of WCW at the time. Sullivan became the Booker of WCW and would remain as Booker throughout the Monday Night Wars. And it was at this time when Sullivan formed the infamous Dungeon of Doom, a main event faction who were particularly memorable throughout their feud with Hulk Hogan. Hogan even showed the first signs of becoming a heel in this feud as Sullivan seduced him to the dark side for a short time. In 1997, Sullivan lost a retirement match to Chris Benoit, although that is just the start of the story. Chris Benoit's relationship with Kevin Sullivan. In his last feud as a full-time wrestler, many say that Kevin Sullivan booked his own divorce. His real-life wife at the time was Nancy Toffaloni, who would become Nancy Benoit, who portrayed his valet, Woman. Her name was Woman. As Booker of WCW at the time, Sullivan booked the storyline of Chris Benoit luring Woman away from the Dungeon of Doom. You can't make this stuff up, people. Since these were the days of kayfabe, Sullivan insisted that Chris and Nancy would travel together to shows and eat together in public to give off the illusion that the storyline was real. Sure enough, the storyline did become real, as Nancy would eventually divorce Sullivan and marry Chris Benoit in real life. So again, the people who purport some kind of an Illuminati conspiracy theory, I mean, everything from the president of Ukraine playing the president in some kind of comedy TV series in Ukraine and then becoming the real president. I mean, Donald Trump in The Simpsons becoming president, then actually becoming president. I mean, some people believe that the Illuminati works through this predictive programming and that things are kind of shown in fake media that will become real or are real, and they're kind of shown in jest, so people kind of assume it's fake, but then it turns out to be real, and it's all some kind of put on game. And this is where the Illuminati, the Illuminatus book trilogy, which I've discussed in the past, touching upon Discordianism and guerrilla ontology, so to speak, where the goal is to kind of make people unsure of what is real and what is a put on by intentionally mixing fact and fiction. Now, is that what happened here, or is this all just mere coincidence? But continuing on here, the repercussions of this feud would have real-life consequences years later. After the tragedy in 2007 in which Chris Benoit murdered Nancy and their son Daniel, conspiracy theories started popping up online suggesting that it was Sullivan who had killed Chris, Nancy, and Daniel and then framed Benoit for the whole thing. Obviously, there is no evidence of this, and it was confirmed Benoit committed murder/suicide. I mean, confirmed by the cops. Does that mean really confirmed? In an interview with Chris Van Vliet, Chris Benoit's son, David Benoit, confirmed that police had investigated Kevin Sullivan and ruled him out of any wrongdoing. David would say, conspiracy theories are just a joke, just a joke. Kevin Sullivan didn't do anything. We looked into that. We had the police look into him. End quote. Wow. Okay. So what does that mean? So does that mean that the Benoit family insisted that the police investigate this guy? Now, is it true that these deaths happened on the 10-year anniversary of their divorce? Because that's a heck of a coincidence. And then there just happens to be another guy named Kevin Sullivan. Now, Sullivan that's a relatively common last name, but just the sheer chance here of stacking these coincidences. Now, is this a Kevin Sullivan who is not the pro wrestler, but possibly related to him? I mean, they do have the same last name, who served on the WWE Board of Directors. I mean, I don't know. These are a lot of coincidences. Now, even if, let's remove the Board of Directors aspect to it, it's still a lot of coincidences here with the satanic cult angle, with the booking of a woman, aka Nancy, who was lured away by Chris Benoit, and then she ended up divorcing Sullivan and marrying Benoit. I mean, is this all just simply too coincidental? There's a Facebook group called Stunning and Interesting Facts That You Didn't Know. This is a post on that group, May 20th, 2013. Stunning opinion, Chris Benoit is innocent. Several months ago, I posted about a proposed petition online that wants to reopen the Chris Benoit double murder-suicide case due to the conspiracy theory which revolves around it. Now, on Stunning Opinion, I will share the point of view of a certain wrestling smark, a wrestling fan who knows the backstage happenings in the wrestling business about one of the theories that Kevin Sullivan killed the Benoit family. Another point here, too, the guy that posted the death of Nancy Benoit before, some 14 hours before it was released, or more, whatever it was. Is it possible he's looking at these theories on wrestling forums and the true killer threw that out there just to screw around with everyone, especially if it's some kind of Illuminati cult-based conspiracy? But even if not, a lot of killers, they like messing with people. So is it possible that the real killer threw it out there? So even though the person who posted it on Wiki wasn't involved in any way, he simply found some kind of reference to it by the real killer. But continuing on here, since today is the 46th birthday of Chris Benoit, the 49th birthday of Nancy Benoit, yes, she's older than Chris. Wait a second. They have the same birthday? They actually don't. Apparently her birthday's May 17th. Benoit's is May 21st. So Benoit's birthday is supposedly... Okay. That would have been kind of weird for the numerology people if it was the same exact date. Although they could probably still speculate. I mean, their birthday is within days of each other, and supposedly they died within days of each other. I don't know what to make of that. Let's continue here. I will pin to top this article again come June 22nd for the 6th anniversary of the Benoit family. Okay, this compilation has been making the rounds lately across different wrestling forums. Some of the info is actually very interesting, and some is shockingly contradictory. I'll admit it, it opened my eyes to the fact that the case was concluded very, very quickly. So I found this on WrestleZone forums from another member. This, I think, is very, very interesting. A long read, but to the few intelligent posters on here that don't troll and still talk wrestling, this may be of interest to the case. The tragic deaths of Chris Benoit and his wife Nancy and son Daniel have shocked the wrestling world. The police are calling it a double murder-suicide, but is it really? Look at some facts. It has been 10 years exactly since Nancy divorced Sullivan to marry Benoit. In the 80s, Sullivan, along with his then-wife Nancy, were running a gimmick in wrestling of how they were Satanists, and Nancy was known as the fallen angel. She later became known as Woman. The trouble with the Satanist gimmick was it was for real and was not a work or fake. In 1990, Sullivan was the booker for WCW, and he scripted his wife Nancy into having an affair with Benoit, who was a member of the Four Horsemen. This made for a good angle, except the acting became reality as Chris and Nancy actually fell in love, and Nancy divorced Sullivan to marry Benoit. Another point, too, Benoit's other son, David Benoit, he said the police ruled him out. Now, if the police ruled him out and he really was guilty, and the police just didn't find it out, they told David Benoit. Of course, David Benoit is going to think it's true if he trusts the police. Another darker theory is if David Benoit somehow is in on something. But either way, just because someone says something doesn't make it true. That's why we don't trust the words of humans on MINDSHOCK. Not that they're lying. They could be saying what they think is the truth, but they could be mistaken. Humans are fallible. Again, a shocking concept to coincidence theorists and authority-worshipping cultists who think police can't make mistakes or who think police can't be corrupt. Of course they can. Benoit left the WCW to go work for WWE, which was then known as WWF. It is a fact that Sullivan threatened Benoit and told him he would kill him. Yes, that was 10 years ago, but Sullivan is no dummy. He is known for being a calculating, conniving, cold-hearted individual. Retired wrestler Dusty Rhodes even said that he danced with the devil when working with Sullivan. Today, according to a reliable source, Sullivan is a high-ranking member of the Satanic Church. You know what's funny? All these so-called reliable sources are never actually nailed down, so we have no way of knowing whether it's reliable or not. But the police need to consider the possibility that Sullivan carried out these gruesome murders in order to have his revenge, which is what Satanists live for. He could have entered the home with an accomplice or accomplices and held Benoit at gunpoint. Sullivan could have then bound up Nancy and made Benoit and his son Daniel watch as he strangled the life out of her. Then, the next day, making Benoit and his son spend the day in agony, murdered Daniel because of his hatred for the offspring of Benoit and Nancy. Then he could have made Benoit wait an entire day before killing him, to be by hanging in the basement. You know, one of the biggest things that points to this theory possibly being true is, again, if Benoit really does have severe brain damage, then it all goes out the window. But if his brain damage is not that severe and he wanted to kill them, why would he put his knee in his wife's back and choke her from behind? I mean, that just seems kind of weird. Would that be the number one way to kill her if he really wanted to kill her? Whereas, if there were intruders, especially some with personal grudges, that is obviously something they might do, especially if they were making Benoit watch at gunpoint. Again, I'm not saying this is what happened, but theoretically, if we're looking at all the variables, it's hard to say that this is not a possibility at all. By doing this, not only would Kevin Sullivan have lived out his satanic church creed with his lust for revenge, but he would have destroyed Benoit's reputation, which is what has happened now, as the wrestling world is attacking the memory of Chris Benoit, remembering him as an insane baby killer and wife killer instead of the great world champion wrestler and friend that he was. See, that's another point that really kind of points in the direction of possibly this being some kind of personal grudge or conspiracy, because if it really was just some burglars who didn't specifically know Benoit, why would they care if the bodies were discovered or anything was done a particular way? But if they really wanted to frame Benoit and destroy his reputation forever, basically, or as much as possible, then it seems like these are actions they might take. And again, we have to consider the timeline of the phone calls versus text messages and the exact time of death. Although it would seem that the police might have to be in on this conspiracy or just completely incompetent. Again, it's very difficult to see this transpiring without some kind of either gross police incompetence or complicity. In either case, it would be interesting to have the FBI or some kind of outside upper agency investigate this case objectively. Some people allege that the Satanic Church has people inside in law enforcement as well, which again, in the post-Epstein era, it's not as outlandish as coincidence theorists once hallucinated it to be, that people in positions of power can't be corrupt or part of any kind of corrupt human trafficking or any kind of other organizations of this nature. And of course, if this is some kind of vast Illuminati conspiracy, obviously they would have local departments in their pocket as well. Satanists hate the Bible, and the police have stated that a Bible was found next to the bodies of Benoit's wife and son. This would serve as a bizarre calling card, as if to either say, what good did your Bible do? Or to throw off investigators to keep them from suspecting Sullivan and his Satanists would have been involved. And if Benoit did it, why would he have placed a Bible besides Nancy and Daniel and not place one beside his own if he knew he was about to take his own life? I actually already answered that earlier. Suicide is a sin, so it might not have been appropriate to put the Bible next to his own body, where it might have been to put it next to the bodies of his wife and son, if he is guilty. I wonder why the police have not even considered investigating the possibility that Sullivan killed Benoit, Nancy, and Daniel. It is certainly a possibility worth looking into. Also, Benoit was going to be crowned ECW World Champion on Sunday night. Why would he murder his family and kill himself when he was about to be on top again and make lots more money? Again, someone with a personal grudge. The timing seems to align perfectly here. If it's the 10-year anniversary of the divorce from Sullivan, and Benoit is about to become champion that weekend, I mean, it seems like that would be a good time for a Satanist to want to act on this. Again, if he was definitively ruled out, that's fine. But unless we have direct evidence of how that ruling out was done, it's kind of difficult to say. Why would he tie up his wife before killing her? He would have no reason to, but Kevin sure would. Sure, Benoit had some problems with Nancy, but that was 4 years ago. What married couple doesn't have problems? Remember also that they reconciled, and as far as everyone knows, there had been no other incidents reported. Hulk Hogan said this about Nancy Benoit. She was into devil worship stuff. It was part of her wrestling character, but she was somebody who gets so close to their character, someone who gets into their character too much. Sometimes these people believe their own publicity. Interesting statement from the Hulkster. One also needs to consider the fact that Benoit loved his kids and was so proud of his son. He let Daniel wear suits and ties to his wrestling events, and Daniel was proud of his dad. He was loved and respected by all those who knew him. In my opinion, there is no way he would have murdered his family. The whole murder case has Satanists written all over it, and Sullivan is a Satanist and has the motive to murder them. I am encouraged anyone who reads this to send this to police authorities and circulate it on the internet so the facts can be investigated before the case is closed and Benoit is written off in history as a murderer. If Sullivan is the real killer, justice should be served. I mean, some interesting comments here also revolving around Sullivan's threat on Benoit's life. Supposedly it was Mike Graham who threatened Benoit's life and not Sullivan. And Graham did it because Benoit was causing problems and wasn't drawing money. So supposedly Graham said, quote, I saved the company $3 million a year by firing him. It's not like people were paying to see him, end quote. But either way, it seems like there was a threat from either Sullivan or Sullivan through Mike Graham. Now, threatening someone's life is not to be taken lightly, especially when the guy basically took your ex-wife. I mean, it's kind of crazy. I mean, one of the main points here is, did Chris Benoit and his wife Nancy, did they really suspect they were being followed? See, if it's just Benoit and he does have a lot of brain damage, okay, whatever. But if Nancy Benoit also apparently thinks that she's being followed and is also changing her route to and from home in general, and they possibly did see somebody following them, I mean, what does that all mean? So apparently, Nancy Benoit was having an affair with Chris Benoit before she divorced Sullivan. So it was an official extramarital affair. She also managed Benoit's career for a certain period of time. What's also curious here, in December 2006, Nancy Benoit had back and neck fusion surgery with Lloyd Youngblood, the same surgeon who had previously done a 3-hour neck operation on Chris Benoit, June 28, 2001. Huh. Some people are alleging that Kevin Sullivan, not the pro wrestler, but the one that was on the WWE board of directors. I mean, how many coincidences are we on now? The Kevin Sullivan that was not the pro wrestler previously married to Nancy Benoit, but the one on the WWE board of directors, they were alleging that he was the Wikipedia editor. I mean, would the FBI make that public, though? I guess they wouldn't, right? Because that would be too crazy. But if he was that, I mean, how much of a coincidence would that be? Is that Kevin Sullivan related to the Kevin Sullivan pro wrestler? And even if they're not related, were they in cahoots regarding something? The Wrestling Facts YouTube channel has an interesting video, 10 disturbing facts that prove Chris Benoit is innocent. We went over this in the bullet points for the 24, but there's an interesting comment here by Midnight Movie Man. Let's look at a few things in context to give this a fair assessment. A, have bookers and the WWE specifically covered up murder? Yes, notably Snuka, but quite a few alleged. Might have to do a podcast on that. B, has a wrestler ever gone on a killing spree due to steroids? No. C, do wrestling companies want a long, open investigation or a short, quick one? Probably the quicker, the better. That's another point, too. The WWE certainly has the funds to pay off the right people. Now, whether they actually did that or not, I'm not gonna go down that rabbit hole right now. But they clearly had the money, especially back then. Some people think they're not doing too well these days, at least compared to back then. But back then, they were making bank. They clearly had the money to pay off who needed to be paid off, regardless of what the real truth is. D, have wrestlers been killed from vengeance? Yes, Brody being the biggest example. Knowing all of these things, we can give a lot more credence to the possibility that Kevin Sullivan did this, and too many people knew about it for PR to actually warrant Vince, even if he could, requesting the investigation be extended. My point is, even though it's messed up and I'm not defending him, Vince would rather Chris be framed than have to go through years of trials and possibly have to revisit the steroid trauma. We do have undisputed proof that Chris believed he was being watched, and he loved his family. We also have proof that Kevin Sullivan is not a very good man. All I am saying is I do not see it as disrespectful or distasteful to employ the possibility that Kevin might have done this, which is what makes more sense to me if you look at everything chronologically. What really makes it interesting as the text sent after death. This wasn't an hour or two where the coroner could have made a mistake. This means someone definitely sent a text from Chris's phone after he died. That alone is enough to make me question his guilt. I mean, some good points here, and even if it wasn't Kevin Sullivan, again, Chris Benoit is high profile. If there was someone else who wanted to take him out for whatever reason, or possibly maybe the initial plan, this is another thing coincidence theorists really have trouble with. Humans are fallible. If some criminals wanted to maybe do some kind of kidnap, ransom situation, or whatever the case may be, maybe they never intended it to be murder. And then obviously things go wrong. Murphy's Law is a very real thing. Criminals are not exempt from Murphy's Law. Just because someone's a criminal, a burglar, whatever, that doesn't mean their plans will always go perfectly. But for some reason, coincidence theorists really have a hard time with that. A few other people chiming in on this video, somebody 26 years as law enforcement. This case never sat right with me. I still believe he was innocent. Another interesting post here. I know Chris, Nancy, and Daniel. Working in radio for over 20 years, I had many opportunities to meet and spend time with Chris and many members of the WWE. My family from the same area as Nancy. My family knew hers. Chris came to my studios the fall before he died. We actually had plans for a motorcycle trip. Chris, Nancy, my wife, and I, we had bikes and equipment reserved through a friend who owns a Harley dealership for the month following his death. He called me a week before he died to lock everything down for the trip. The Chris I knew loved his family more than life itself. To say I was shocked to hear the news would be a major understatement. Regardless of the facts surrounding the deaths, we miss them terribly. May they rest in peace. Interesting. So just a week before his death, he was confirming plans for a motorcycle trip. The other thing regarding exactly if Kevin Sullivan really was investigated, how exactly was he ruled out? Because if he had a definitive alibi, how does that mean he didn't hire other people to do this hit? Like, how would they determine he's innocent in that regard? Here's an interesting article by Khal, Khal, October 7th, 2015 on yahoo.com. Chris Benoit murder-suicide, a professional hit, ? Journalist Bill Apter thinks that may have been the case. In June 2007, the professional wrestling world was rocked when it learned that Chris Benoit, his wife Nancy, and their son Daniel had died at their home. Benoit, a well-respected hand in the ring, had been to the top of the mountain in the WWE, was a member of the Four Horsemen in the WCW, and made a name for himself in the early ECW days, as well as Mexico, Japan, and Canada. Benoit's wife, Nancy, who had been a valet in the pro wrestling business for years, was found bound and strangled, while their 7-year-old son was found dead in his room. Chris was found in the basement with police determining his cause of death being suicide by hanging. Police concluded Benoit killed his wife, then murdered his son sometime later, before ultimately taking his own life. No one truly knows the definitive why or how this all happened, but with the inner turmoil that many spoke of between Nancy and Chris are believed to have triggered Chris into committing such heinous acts. Well, everyone except legendary professional wrestling journalist Bill Apter. Apter has been involved in the professional wrestling circuit since the 70s and rose to prominence via his work with publications like Pro Wrestling Illustrated, which played to the more theatrical side of pro wrestling without spoiling things for the fans. Those magazines haven't been as prominent, thanks internet, but he still remained a figure in bringing the proper news side to professional wrestling, so it made sense that pro wrestler Chris Jericho would invite him on his Talk is Jericho podcast. It's there that people got a feel of Apter's theory on what happened in the Benoit household back in June 2007. It's a story that differs from what police may have found. Quote, I think somehow Chris got in some sort of trouble. I don't know what it was. I don't know what it was or whatever, but I think something happened. I think when he got home, Nancy and his son were already dead. To me, if a murder is done in a professional way, they can make it look like you did it and you committed suicide as well, end quote. Apter's main reasoning, ? That'd be the love that Chris had for Daniel. Another quote, I understand that husbands and wives will kill each other sometimes. They do, but not the boy. This is what didn't make sense to me, because I knew they had a volatile relationship, Chris and Nancy. There were a lot of issues and all that, but because of Daniel, the boy, and how enamored he was with Daniel, I still today can't fathom that he could do this. End quote. While Apter doesn't really have an answer for what Benoit would have done to have angered someone to fake a murder-suicide, the official police deduction on the situation isn't any more informative. There's no definitive answer about what happened to the Benoit family 8 years ago, and one can't disagree at Jericho calling the situation shady. Irv Muchnick's brilliant book, Chris and Nancy, The True Story of the Benoit Murder, Suicide, and Pro Wrestling's Cocktail of Death, tried to answer some of these questions regarding the incident, the investigation, and more, but only came up with more questions. And while many think it was either the concussions Benoit suffered or the mixture of pills and steroids that turned a volatile situation deadly, this tragic incident doesn't seem to have any way of finding a conclusion. And an even more dark theory, possibly the darkest theory of all, is if Nancy or someone else killed Daniel and then Chris stumbled into that situation, how would that have unfolded? Again, I am not alleging anything is true or untrue or there is any definitive evidence for anything. Another theory here is if this wasn't a hit per se, it was just burglars who maybe killed his wife and his son and then left. And then if Benoit comes into the house and his wife and son are dead, what does he do? Is he going to commit suicide? Is that a possibility? Again, let's not fall for false dichotomies, because apparently his brain did have some level of damage to it. But even if it didn't, could you blame? It's kind of hard to blame the guy if your wife and son are dead. It's hard. It's really, really hard to say if you knew him and he was already depressed and had all these other issues, would he kill himself? Would that be the straw that broke the camel's back? Other people believe that Eddie Guerrero's death was kind of key in Chris Benoit's eventual breakdown. But again, let's not fall for false dichotomies, because we really don't know what happened. Any number of factors could be at play here. Another thing I keep going back to also, is it a fact that the police cannot find Chris Benoit's cell phone or Nancy's cell phones? If both of their cell phones are missing, that's really fishy. They should still be able to get all of the phone data, the pings, cell phone tower locations. If these messages were sent from other locations, has this been properly investigated? That's something that that needs to be nailed down, because is it possible how could they not have recovered the cell phones if they were in the house? Or did they recover the cell phones and then they went missing? Why would they go missing? Also on subreddit it is discussed, supposedly the Blue Meanie, Sonny, and Kevin Nash all brought up rumors that it was some kind of a professional hit. Now again, they could just be talking rumors. They didn't link the exact interviews here on exactly what they said, but it would be interesting to get more pro wrestling insiders off the record. Because, how many of them would state their true beliefs on the record, regardless of what they really were? So the final most outlandish thing we're going to go over is apparently the writer of the song Chris Benoit for the Insane Clown Posse. So supposedly this guy claimed him and Chris Benoit were involved in an Illuminati-type cult that revolved around cloning. Supposedly this group cloned children and famous people for sexual or murder pleasures at some point. The guy claimed Chris Benoit's clones were the Queen of England's favorite sex toy. It was really nice piece of fiction. It was entertaining for a while. So again, we don't know if this is I don't know if that's legitimate in any way, or if this writer of the song is completely insane. But yeah, some of these Illuminati theories get really, really crazy. And with the cloning and all that, we've seen them before. So here's the last point here regarding any possible conspiracy or cover-up. If all the records here are sealed, if there's no cell phones, if there's no exact details, what are the testimonies of the officers who first arrived? Because what's with the changing of the body positions where they were found? Are these just clerical errors or broken telephone and reporting? None of this really makes any sense. This is as far from a clear-cut case as you can get in terms of murder-suicides. There's a lot that doesn't add up here. I have a lot of questions about Chris Benoit, but even more Nancy Benoit, about who they think was following them, how often they were being followed, and all of these things. Obviously, their close friends would know, but why are they going to say anything about it? I don't know. There needs to be, of course, an independent investigation. But if there is a conspiracy and cover-up, it's awfully convenient to just say case closed, all records sealed. That's the end of that. And no one will ever find out the truth. That's why, as I've talked about in other true crime podcasts, the need for some kind of independent agency that supersedes authority of even the FBI, and that way they can solve all these cases because they would have full access to all files, all evidence, and unrestricted investigative ability in terms of interviewing people, crime scenes, everything, and then they can verify, like, what's the harm in verifying so-called official narratives? Just to rule out any possible theories, just to double check that justice was truly done. I'm not saying it wasn't. I'm not saying Chris Benoit is innocent. I don't know how many times I have to say that. No doubt the comment section will be flooded with the Dunning-Kruger crowd who are somehow alleging that I'm saying that Benoit is innocent. I have no clue. I wasn't there, so I don't know what happened. All I'm saying is there are enough anomalies and coincidences and missing evidence and problems with timelines to warrant a full investigation. That's all I'm saying. Again, all the MindShock listeners out there, feel free to chime in with your thoughts, comments, opinions, rebuttals, or debunkings of any kind in the comments section. If you enjoyed the podcast, feel free to donate to our PayPal. Help us get more mind-shocking episodes out there in a variety of topics. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, like and share the podcast, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. You can also support the podcast by becoming a YouTube member right here on YouTube. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time. Welcome to MindShock. This is the Chris Benoit Conspiracy Series. I am, of course, your host, Bruce McGuire, and we will be taking a look at further oddities, particularly in and around the home, possibly additional witnesses,
and information that I haven't seen discussed anywhere else. In typical MindShock fashion, with logic and reason at the forefront. If you want to help support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell for notifications. Make sure you allow your device to have those notifications come through. If it's still not working, you can just go to youtube.com/MindShock. A lot of people don't get notifications for some reason. You could also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Access to exclusive streams and chats. Like and share. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comments section. So, the Benoit case is obviously problematic for a lot of different reasons. Some people obviously believe there was more to the case than reported. It might have not been that simple that he just kind of snapped and did this. There might have been way more to the equation, and how much evidence is there of more oddities? So let's take a look at this very interesting Tumblr post. This is expletive loads of wrestling or tumblr.com/expletive loads of wrestling. 10 years, this was, is there a date here for this article? I don't see it. So I'm assuming it was exactly 10-year anniversary here, but let's take a look at it. It was Sunday, June 24th, 2007. I was at a Buffalo Wild Wings with my ex-girlfriend and a friend of mine as would gather monthly to watch the WWE pay-per-view. On this instance, it was Vengeance Night of Champions, an event where CM Punk would be battling Chris Benoit to determine the new CW World Heavyweight Champion, a title that had been vacated by Bobby Lashley. As the event went on, it was announced that John Morrison would be replacing Benoit, with little explanation given as to why Benoit wasn't on the show. The next day, as I was driving home from work, my friend Brandon, who had watched the pay-per-view with the night before, called to tell me the news: Chris Benoit was dead. As I sat at a stoplight only minutes from my house, I remember crying immediately. Benoit wasn't just a favorite wrestler of mine, but an inspiration to work harder, to never give up, to persist in the face of adversity, and to chase every dream you have, regardless of whether or not they're attainable. I remember a video package the WWE had released for Benoit featuring the Finger 11 song One Thing. Wow, Finger 11, are they still around? That was an interesting band. The song still stands as one of my biggest inspirations as I recall how hard Benoit worked in wrestling. What made this death that much more of a shock to me was that only weeks earlier, Benoit had wrestled at an Ohio Valley wrestling event that I was at. He was very personable, smiling at anyone who had approached him and happy to speak with anybody who had questions. I watched Raw that night as Vince McMahon, who only a week earlier had been blown up in a limousine, who could forget that segment, stood solemnly in a ring that stood in an empty arena speaking about Benoit as the episode showcased Benoit's finest moments in the ring. The episode was originally supposed to be a 3-hour memorial tribute to McMahon. Throughout the night, different wrestlers spoke on their fallen friend, some very upset and some downtrodden. But it seemed that some knew the grisly details where others hadn't. Two testimonials that stood out were Chavo Guerrero Jr.'s and a very grim one from William Regal. Regal seemed to lead on that he knew more about the situation, as he neglected to comment on Benoit the man, but rather on Benoit the wrestler. As the week unfolded, details surrounding Benoit's death came to light and showed that Chris, his wife Nancy, formerly known as Woman, in ECW and WCW, and his youngest son Daniel were all found dead in the home that they shared in Atlanta, Georgia. According to the autopsy, Nancy was murdered first, bound at the feet and wrists. She died of asphyxiation Friday, June 22nd, and was found wrapped in a towel with blood under her head and a Bible placed next to her bed. According to the autopsy on Daniel, he had died on Saturday morning as he lay in bed, again with a Bible placed next to him, with Benoit himself dying on Sunday, having used a weight machine to break his own neck as a Bible lay on the weight machine. Although that's the official cause of death listed for each of the involved, there are a lot of details that have been ignored following the incident. For example, several voicemails were left by Benoit to wrestler Chavo Guerrero Jr. and WWE official Brad Armstrong, both of whom stated that Benoit seemed off. Chavo later told that he had spoken to Benoit, who claimed that he had missed his flight and wouldn't be appearing at Vengeance Night of Champions, and was stressed out due to Nancy and Daniel having food poisoning. On Sunday morning between 3:51 and 3:58 a.m., several texts were sent to co-workers and fellow wrestlers from both Chris and Nancy's cell phones, stating that the dogs were in the enclosed pool area and that the garage side door had been left open. A call was also placed to WWE officials by Benoit, who alleged that he was taking his family to the hospital and would be in Houston for the event. According to Nancy's sister Sandra, Benoit's computer history included, quote, the quickest and easiest way to break a neck, end quote. And somebody actually commented that on episode 1 on MindShock, and I kind of brought up that, again, if somebody was looking to set him up, would they put that on the search history to fool all the gullible people? The coincidence there is to just, they wouldn't be able to fathom that any kind of search history could be planted. Again, I am not alleging that is true or untrue. I don't claim anything is true or untrue. I do not claim anyone is innocent or guilty, and the motto here on MindShock is, of course, the only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. When WWE official John Laurinaitis contacted the Fayette County Sheriff's Department to check on the family, the police notified the WWE around 4:15 p.m. to say that 3 bodies had been found and that the home was ruled a major crime scene. Several motives have been listed for the crime, such as Benoit's mental state being so deteriorated due to years of head trauma that his brain resembled an 85-year-old Alzheimer's patient. Steroids were also listed as a potential lead for the cause, as roid rage had been prevalent for years among athletes. But as several wrestlers have stated since the incident, quote, how many baseball players have killed their wife and kid? It's also, or even football players, I mean, it's not exactly common even in contact sports. It's also noted that steroid rage usually leads to rage, not deliberation, which leads to the question of why Nancy's arms and legs had been bound. It's been stated by Benoit's peers that he was immensely paranoid, often traveling different routes from the airport to get to his home in order to evade potential followers. Now, I do have a major mind shock coming at the end of this episode. I'm going to read a tip that came in from a MindShock listener about some kind of alleged inside info, which is very, very mind-shocking to say the least. I don't think it can be written off that easy, so there might be a lot more to all of this. Several wrestlers have claimed that Benoit would have two sides, one that would lash out at you and another that would be your best friend, with the events of the day dictating which one you spoke to. Brad Armstrong, however, stated that Benoit, quote, never said a cross word to anybody, end quote. In 2003, Nancy had filed for divorce citing domestic abuse, but the divorce was dropped and the two continued to be married until their deaths. Hardcore Holly would later state in his autobiography that Benoit would drink heavily when issues with Nancy would arise, which several wrestlers later confirmed. As more details surrounding the Benoit case arose, the WWE issued the following statement on SmackDown. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Last night, on Monday Night Raw, the WWE presented a special tribute show recognizing the career of Chris Benoit. However, now some 26 hours later, the facts of this horrific tragedy are now apparent. Therefore, other than my comments, there will be no mention of Mr. Benoit's name tonight. On the contrary, tonight's show will be dedicated to everyone who has been affected by this terrible incident. This evening marks the first step of the healing process. Tonight, WWE performers will do what they do better than anyone else in the world, entertain you. Following this, the WWE have done all but eliminate Benoit from their history, often negating that he was part of several high-profile events, such as the Royal Rumble, which Benoit won in 2004, or the main event of WrestleMania 20, where Benoit defeated Triple H to win the World Heavyweight Championship. Truly tragic, as the moment has often been cited as one of the greatest in Mania history. There was a photo of Benoit said to have been taken Saturday morning as Nancy was dead in Benoit's home. One strange part of the Benoit situation is that Nancy's Wikipedia page, which can be edited by anyone, listed Nancy as being dead 14 hours before the bodies were found. And we went over this in episode 1. That's obviously a major issue that a lot of coincidence theorists try to explain away, but I don't know if that could be easily explained away. Someone knew something, because how often are just random pro wrestler pages edited like that to say that people are dead that aren't dead? I mean, certain high-profile celebrities are reported as being deceased, but how many wrestlers? I mean, I don't know. What's the precedent there? How many times has that happened? Particularly several hours before it actually happened. The original edit listed, quote, Chris Benoit was replaced by Johnny Nitro for the ECW World Championship match at Vengeance, as Benoit was not there due to personal issues stemming from the death of his wife, Nancy. The man who posted this claimed that it was written due to rumors he'd heard on the internet, and it was found that he'd also made several edits to other Wikipedia articles that were unfounded. And wasn't his IP also in Connecticut, where WWE headquarters is? I actually forgot that detail from the previous episode. It was claimed that Benoit was given 10 months to live due to an enlarged heart by Nancy's sister. What's strange about the case is that a large knife was found under Daniel's bed. Prior to her marriage to Benoit in 2000, Nancy was charged with aggravated battery after chasing her former husband, Kevin Sullivan, with a knife in 97. And of course, there's a huge coincidence stack regarding Kevin Sullivan, who even hung Benoit by the ropes in their match. I mean, it was in one of their matches, just really weird stuff with Sullivan. Benoit's friend, Dean Malenko, stated, quote, "He's not a monster. We're talking about a guy who a month ago was in Jacksonville, and rather than drive down to Orlando, where he needed to be the next day, he took a flight to be home with Daniel," end quote. Another bizarre detail that never seems to get mentioned is that wrestler Dave Taylor was allegedly spotted at the Benoit residence before police arrived. Benoit's neighbor, Holly Schrepfer, was contacted by police to enter the property before they arrived to secure the dogs and check on the family. She discovered the bodies, and whilst fleeing the home, claimed that she saw Dave and his wife carrying a platter of deli food. In no way does this point to Taylor being involved in the deaths, but it's possible that he was coming by to check on his friend. It was suggested that he was sent by the WWE to check out everything and get the facts early to prevent a PR problem. This could also be why William Regal's tribute was so grim, as the two were friends and tag team partners in the WWE. Taylor has since denied that this is possible, as he says he was in Texas on tour with the WWE. There is no evidence for him being in either location other than Schrepfer's claim. So he can't back up his own claim that he was in Texas. So he was on tour in Texas. But what was he doing at that particular minute when Schrepfer alleges that him and his wife, that Dave Taylor and Dave Taylor's wife, were carrying a platter of deli food? It doesn't state here. Are they carrying the platter of deli food into the home or out of the home at that point? It doesn't state here. And so the cops, where exactly were the cops? Did they tell her to go in before they even arrived at the location? It says before police arrived. So if Dave Taylor was there with his wife, were they exiting the house calmly with deli food? Or were they going to enter the home? And by the time police got there, they were gone, so nobody else can corroborate that? I mean, this is post-2000. Do none of these rich people have security cameras at their giant mansions? What's going on with that? Has anybody actually heard of security footage? Warrior Empire stated William Regal was at his house too. At what time? Warrior Empire stated 9 times out of 10 police are paid off. I don't know about that percentage. R1, you have possibly the best podcast I've ever heard. Just wanted to say thanks for that. Yep, thanks, R1. Logic and reason rule the day here. I do not claim anything is true or untrue. We examine every theory, every rabbit hole, and upturn every stone, attempting not to fall for silly logical fallacies like everybody else. William Regal. So Warrior Empire, do you have any information on William Regal being at the home? You mean previously or that day? Heard that from other YouTubers. Previously or that particular day? The same day as the neighbor? Yeah, it's kind of weird that Dave Taylor and was his wife ever interviewed? Was Dave Taylor's wife ever interviewed? Because it would be really creepy if they were calmly walking out of the Benoit home, which had 3 bodies. Because it doesn't state here whether they were calm or not, or whether they were going towards the house or away from the home. Because she discovered the body, and so she's running out of the home in horror, allegedly. She claimed that she saw Dave and his wife carrying a platter of deli food. That's all it says. It doesn't say in or out. I mean, and presumably, if they're good friends, the neighbor would know exactly what Dave Taylor looked like, who Dave Taylor was. I mean, why would she randomly confuse people for Dave Taylor and his wife? Doesn't really make sense. Warrior Empire. And I find it odd that Paul Heyman and other people are quick to say that SOB Chris did it and they was quick to erase him. Yeah, that's really bizarre. I mean, obviously there would have had to have been a full investigation. So that's definitely odd. Whether he did it or not, that's odd, no question. I think it's also fairly obvious that the WWE knew a whole lot more about the situation, regardless of what actually happened. So, yeah, I mean, there's definitely so many issues with this one, and it doesn't really get discussed as much anymore for some reason, but let's continue here. So Taylor denied that he was at Benoit's home, but apparently he couldn't provide evidence that he was at the WWE tour in Texas. That's what it says here. I don't know if he has since then. But continuing the post here, Benoit kept a personal journal following the death of longtime best friend Eddie Guerrero. In it, he would write letters to Eddie, which makes me wonder why he never wrote a suicide note or farewell. Well, if he completely snapped, maybe he wouldn't have, but that doesn't explain all the Bibles. And also, based on the logistics of the weight machine, I mean, I'm assuming the Bible was put either on the sea. I mean, where exactly was it put? And could it have been put there prior to snapping one's own neck with the machine, if it's even possible to do so, which is highly disputed? In the personal effects returned to Benoit's father, a handwritten note was found in a Bible that said, quote, "I am preparing to leave this earth," end quote. And was there handwriting analysis on that particular note? Or was that note written a year or 2 or 3 years prior? Within a few months of each other, Guerrero, Johnny Grunge, and Victor Black Cat Marr all died, respectively consisting of Benoit's best friend, his local buddy who he went to after problems with Nancy, and his riding partner on Japanese tour. Wasn't there another? I thought there was another pro wrestler friend of his that he had worked with prior who also died either the day before or the day after. I forgot his name. Chris's diary remains weren't found by police, but rather by neighbor Holly Schrepfer in a garbage can. So that's kind of weird. If you're going to off yourself, are you going to throw your own diary in the garbage can? Or if there's other people involved and they did the murders and they're walking out of the house reading the diary for kicks, would they bring it with them or would they toss it in the trash on their way out? Again, I am not claiming to know, but that is curious. How many people that have committed suicide or even murder-suicides threw their own diaries in the garbage? That'd be a curious stat to know. Also, Holly Schrepfer, apparently she said she found it in the garbage can, so is that true that it even was in the garbage can? I don't know. There are a lot of facts that don't make sense with what has been alleged to have happened. Toxicology reports claim that all three involved in the incident, Chris, Nancy, and Daniel, were sedated heavily. There are claims that beer cans were found near Benoit's body, but there was no alcohol found in his system. And again, I'm not sure if there was corroboration on whether the cans were even tested for DNA. There were texts sent from Benoit's home that were sent after Benoit's time of death as determined by police. There are several wrestling fans who have turned on Benoit and refused to give credit to his hard work in the sport. That is their prerogative. I personally love Benoit as a wrestler and will never shun the fact that he gave a lot to wrestling, but I also don't have children and have never been married. I don't know how I'd feel from that perspective. Well, I mean, what does that have to do with anything else? Because he's either innocent or he's guilty. That being said, after watching several videos and reading endless articles and write-ups regarding the case, I do think that everything is worth a second look, as I don't think it happened quite like we all have been told that it did. Nevertheless, two great figures of wrestling history died 10 years ago, and the wrestling world was changed forever as a result. Rest in peace, Chris, Nancy, Daniel. So this was from the Expletive Loads of Wrestling Tumblr blog. Yes, Warrior Empire Owen Hart also died in the ring in the 90s. William was by the house, I think, a few days before. Yeah, I think I went over that in episode 1. I don't think it was the day of. Yeah, his theme song's pretty awesome. Regardless of what happened. Okay, let's go to further curiosities, because there's a lot of unanswered questions about this neighbor. So, user since deleted on WrestlingFigs.com posted this July 24th, 2012. It has come to my attention the woman Holly Schrepfer that found the bodies of Benoit and his family has a criminal record. Don't believe me? Check out this article in The Citizen. This article is from January 5th, 2010. A Central Fayette County man and woman were charged, and more than 24 underage drinkers were cited by Fayette County Sheriff's deputies New Year's Eve at the couple's residence on Green Meadow Lane near Quarters Road. That's a semi-rural area between Redwine and Ebenezer Roads in the south central part of the county. Terry Schrepfer, 52, and Holly Schrepfer, 50, were both charged with keeping a disorderly house and contributing to the delinquency of a minor, according to Sheriff spokesperson Brent Rowan. Rowan said deputies were called to the residence by a neighbor who called 911 about a loud party. Officers arrived to find a large number of underage drinkers on the premises. He said deputies took 20 underage drinkers aged 17 to 20 to jail on charges of possession of alcohol by a minor. Rowan said, adding that 2 of those were also charged with obstruction for running from police. Also cited for possession of alcohol by a minor were 7 teenagers under the age of 17 who were placed in the custody of their parents, Rowan said. It may also be important to note that Holly Schrepfer has 2 names she goes by. The other name, Holly McFaig. This makes researching the woman extremely difficult. The real question is, can this woman be trusted? Well, I don't know if necessarily anybody should be trusted. We got to follow the evidence objectively. But that is a curiosity if she's got some kind of double identity. Now, is that simply her maiden name? I don't know. There really isn't a ton of information, though. Apparently, she left the area, at least temporarily, immediately after this. I don't know what that means. Apparently, the police were terrified of Benoit's dogs, so they asked the neighbor to go in. But what was weird is, apparently this was all before they ever even arrived there. So they're just calling up random private citizens to do their work for them. Does anybody find that weird? I don't know. That's kind of weird, isn't it? Like the police are just calling up random private citizens to do their job. It's also kind of weird, like even ESPN.com is reporting that, so WWE were the ones reporting that Daniel had some kind of medical problems. Whereas the neighbor, or the prosecutor, disputed this. So July 3rd, 2007, ESPN.com. Prosecutor disputes the WWE's assertion that Sun had mental retardation or Fragile X syndrome. So why was the WWE pushing that his son had this issue? I mean, I don't know. Were they trying to say, so a spokesperson for WWE, which shortly after the killings deflected speculation about steroids by saying the Benoits had argued over whether the wrestler should stay home more to take care of the 7-year-old son, also backed away Tuesday from its statements about the boy's diagnosis. So WWE were trying to say that he had this condition and that the Benoits were like they wanted, where Chris wanted to stay home more. Is that what the WWE were pushing? Because WWE attorney Jerry McDevitt was the one that was saying Daniel had Fragile X syndrome. That's kind of weird. The other thing that's interesting is that at the same time, WWE issued a news release saying steroids, quote, were not and could not be related to the cause of death, end quote. So is this all before autopsies, before investigations? WWE is already issuing news releases saying that steroids were not and could not be related. That's kind of weird. Like, how would they know either way? I mean, if there's no investigation, it's kind of weird. But they were definitely trying to spin some damage control. Yeah, it actually is kind of hard to find information about Holly McFaig, or... Yeah, it's weird. She's listed as McFaig in some sources, Schrepfer in others. I mean, yeah, that is pretty weird. There's another interesting article here on WrestleZone.com, July 24th, 2007. Police unable to find diary. WWE star Dave Taylor called Benoit's neighbor Holly McFaig at one point prior to WWE's Rich Herring calling the local police on June 25th. Apparently, Taylor had known McFaig in some form. So this is officially reported that Taylor called McFaig, called Holly the neighbor. And Holly reported that he was physically there with his wife. I mean, that actually leads more credence to the neighbor's story that he was there, unless she's trying to blame him. But apparently it's on record that Dave Taylor called Holly. Wow. Police did find Nancy's purse, evidence of the insurance policy Benoit had taken out in Edmonton for his children, David and Megan, and Benoit's ex-wife, Martina. Police were unable to find Benoit's diary. As noted before, Benoit wrote letters to his pal Eddie in his diary to help him cope with his friend's passing. Police have also been unable to find pictures, photos that Nancy's best friends were aware of, Nancy kept of herself showing evidence of being beaten. Photos were found of Nancy that showed she had been beaten earlier in her life. So supposedly Nancy's friends said that there were recent photos showing bruises or whatever, and the police couldn't find them, and apparently the police couldn't find the diary either, although Holly said she found it in the trash. So at which point did she find it? After all the law enforcement searches failed to find it? Did they even try to find it? Did they look through the garbage and then she did when they didn't? I mean, there's a lot of unanswered questions here. Candy Kane posted, something that's not been talked about is she stabbed her second husband here in Daytona Beach. Are you talking about Nancy? I mentioned that earlier that there was a charge. It stated that she went after him with a knife. I don't know the extent of that, but yeah. But apparently, again, according to WrestleZone.com and the Wrestling Observer, it was reported on record that Dave Taylor called Holly prior to Rich Herring on behalf of the WWE calling the local police on June 25th. What does all that mean? And why did she say he was there if he wasn't there? With his wife and some deli food. Were they coming to check on Benoit? But then why would he have denied doing that? On the Squared Circle subreddit, Suplex Through Glass posted this 7 years ago. Benoit Conspiracy has been watching a lot of shoot interviews and stumbled upon one about Chris Benoit after he died. Various wrestlers like the Blue Meanie, Sonny, and Kevin Nash talked, and some brought up the rumors of it being a professional hit. Obviously, Chavos said that on Jericho's show as well, or certain things that could be interpreted as such. I think I actually read this on episode 1. Alan Joestar posted, "Have you heard about the guy who wrote the song Chris Benoit for the ICP? That guy talks about how him and Benoit were involved in an Illuminati-type cult that revolves around cloning. It includes expletive like this group cloning children and famous people for sexual or murder pleasures. At some point, the guy claims Chris Benoit's clones were the Queen of England's favorite sex toy." Now, that might be wild and out there, but in the post-Epstein era, if cloning technology is real, like in another 10, 20, 50 years, not in relation to this case, but if things like that are being done, would people actually be surprised by this in a few more decades? Apparently, Brian Ladd, the dream psychic, did a drawing claiming a knife was used in the murder, implied Sullivan was involved. And apparently there doesn't seem to be verification of any DNA testing done at all at the scene regarding anybody. Because if there were other people in the home, they could find that out. Presumably, if they actually did some testing, or were they not interested in finding out what really happened? And if so, why? Because obviously a lot of people think this is all connected to the higher-ups at the WWE, possibly Vince McMahon. And obviously his image quite tarnished recently. Paid. Yeah, paid by whom and why? Bad Ass Suchi posted this comment on the MindShock Benoit episode. Benoit's doctor probably killed him and his family. Somehow that other guy who he stole Nancy from were probably in cahoots with this doctor. WWE did everything, especially to not look further into this case, but just fudge up the company by making it PG. F. Linda McMahon. Interesting comment there. So this guy thinks that Benoit's doctor was in cahoots with Kevin Sullivan. DeMar Thomas posted, someone that moved the dogs was probably someone the dogs recognized, and they entered the home and took everyone out, moved the bodies, and put the Bibles next to them, and changed the crime scene to make it look like he did it, and also had keys to the home. The neighbor, Holly, was the only outsider that were friends with Chris and Nancy to have keys to the gate and home. I heard she said that she told police she saw 3 people coming with food towards the Benoit home and were seen leaving in dark clothing. The police said they don't have any record of that and said she never said that. That's interesting. What does everybody make of that? Mike Matthews, very interesting comment here. Ray Rawls texted Benoit that he was coming on the weekend with a friend who wanted to meet Benoit. The guy who posted the Wikipedia is a 1-minute drive from WWE headquarters. Benoit's neighbor has ties to Sullivan and Freemasonry. Beer cans were not tested. Yeah, so I haven't seen conclusive evidence that there's anything that ties Holly to Sullivan. Oh, Beef Wellington. That was supposedly the guy who died the same weekend as Benoit. What does everybody make of that? June 24th, 2007. Biff Wellington. Supposedly this guy had suffered multiple strokes and was battling drug addiction. Bauer's parents, so his real name was Shane Alexander Bauer. Bauer's parents found his body in bed at his home June 24th, 2007. They were concerned because they had not heard from him for 4 days. Medical officials examining the body believe he had been dead for a few days due to a heart attack. Coincidentally, his body was found on the same day as his former tag partner, Chris Benoit. So they were found on the same day, but supposedly he had been dead for several days. Yeah, that's quite a lot of people in the same circle who are dying in a short period of time. Ben Pat posted, tying up loose ends. What would they all know, though? Because there's plenty of other people who knew Benoit who weren't killed. Candy stated, McMahon always creeped me out. Yeah, me too. Like, I'd watched pro wrestling since late 80s, early 90s. And yeah, there was always something off about that guy. He just doesn't look right in the head. There's definitely something off about him. I don't know what it is. I'm not claiming to know. But yeah, Vince would not be... When people ask me to name a normal person, Vince McMahon is not the first person who comes to mind. Candy posted, I believe no one wants to believe that Chris was capable of this. Well, that might be true, but again, if we're just looking at the evidence, it doesn't quite add up, regardless of who it is. I mean, pro wrestler XYZ, we're just looking at the situation objectively. Because there's all these problems here with the investigation, with the neighbor, with all these other individuals. Vince reminds me of Trump. I don't get the same weird satanic stare vibes from Trump as Vince, but who knows? Yeah, I remember that Warrior Empire. Yeah, Trump had some pro wrestling appearances. Pretty funny. I wonder if Trump was ever interviewed specifically about Benoit or Vince. He doesn't seem to have a filter, so maybe he might say something. Jamel promo was Whack McGee posted. But I've said that to myself when the story first came out back in 2007. I don't think Chris Benoit did that. No man is going to work so hard and does a headbutt dive and made so much money and then kills his family and himself and plus cremate him. I don't care if a man has an argument with his wife, he's not going to keep going to work and working hard to make money and then waste it all. It's just, I don't care if a man has an argument with his wife. It just doesn't sound right to me. We got little children, the bumps they had all the time, and they don't grow up to do crazy things. I think the doctors are lying. I believe Chris Benoit owed money to the mobs. I believe Chris Benoit owed money to the mobs for his steroids or drug habits. I think the police was paid off by some higher power because we have to think back when Ellen DeGenerate Dancer killed himself last year. The police did investigation on his wife. Let's just say if Chris Benoit did murder his family and himself, they did not do investigation like what if somebody broke into his home. It sounds really fishy. Yeah, I mean, the investigation, there's definitely issues with it, regardless of what happened or if he's innocent or guilty. I mean, that's why you do real investigation, so you can definitively determine these things so that there aren't these open questions later. Tiffany posted all the interviews firsthand from those closest to him in the days just after the triple homicide, along with the newspaper clippings I still have, along with the fact that their narrative changed so drastically and so quickly just days after, are what will never ever convince me that Benoit did this. Too much evidence pointing to Kevin Sullivan. It would take a complete reinvestigation for me to ever change my mind on the official narrative Benoit was framed. Well, the official narrative could still be mostly bunk, and he could still be guilty if it all went down completely differently. But again, we'll never know that if there's not full investigation. Stephen Gallant posted, Chris Benoit and Jeffrey Dahmer have the same birthday. Is that true? That's kind of weird. Let's see if that's true. Chris Benoit, born May 21st. Dahmer, born May 21st. Wow. That's kind of weird, I guess. 1/365th chance of that happening. Ben Pat asked, wonder if Vince ever went to Little St. James. Did Vince run in the same circles? The thing about Vince McMahon, though, is this guy was a workaholic. I mean, he works all day, every day. So, I mean, apparently he doesn't take vacations, right? I mean, I don't know if that's true or not, but apparently, like, his schedule was bonkers. I listened to a couple interviews talking about that, where he would work close to 20 hours a day. I mean, he would go to the WWE headquarters gym at 1 or 3 in the morning after working all day, then get up early, work all day. He's at every event. I mean, he's doing all. So just timeline alone, I mean, did he even have the opportunity to go? Did he have the time frame? Candy posted he was physically abusive to Nancy before, and she was going to get a divorce, and her sister pressured her to give the marriage another chance. Warrior football players have way more bumps than that, and they not doing all that. I mean, some football players, I mean, there's a lot of domestic violence situations, but yeah, I don't know about how many are actually killing their own kid. Purple Sky posted, my theory is that it had something to do with the 2007 steroid scandal. Congress was investigating the WWE, and after Benoit's death, the investigations just stopped. You can get over 400 pages of police docs by doing a document request with the Fayette County Sheriff's Department, and you can get forensic docs by requesting them from the GBI Crime Lab. Or you can check out my channel. Links are in the description box of my Benoit videos. Okay. So this is Purple Sky channel, Purple Sky 11 on YouTube. Quite a number of videos on Benoit. We could check those out, and I can go over them on the next episode. Dan the Man Can posted, I believe Chris Benoit, Nancy, and their son were murdered and Chris was set up. I believe the person who murdered them or had them murdered was Nancy's ex-husband, Kevin Sullivan, who other wrestlers said he threatened to kill Chris after Nancy divorced him to be with Chris. Kevin Sullivan is also allegedly a high-ranking member in the Church of Satan. Chavo Guerrero said Chris and Nancy felt like someone was following or stalking them, so they started taking alternate route homes close to their death. So both of them said this to multiple people? Chavo, because people that are saying that Benoit was simply paranoid, was Nancy also corroborating that people were following and watching them? Chavo also said that when he was on the phone with Chris the night of his death, he heard a knock on Chris's door. Chris put the phone down, answered the door. He heard a scuffle occur through the phone before the phone call suddenly ended. Nancy's death was posted on Wiki about 14 hours before law enforcement or anyone else discovered the dead bodies, ? I believe Kevin Sullivan could have possibly had members in the Church of Satan to Chris and Satan prior to killing them because Kevin couldn't get over the fact that Nancy was having an affair with Chris and divorced him for Chris. In this video, Sullivan was the only one to try to slip in questionable things about Chris's character while trying to compliment him and saying he didn't have any bad blood with him at the same time. Others, at the very least, said Chris would never hurt his son. That case should be reopened. Lee Johnstone posted, I think Chris Benoit was selling prescription drugs such as steroids, testosterone, and painkillers. It would explain why Dave Taylor was seen outside the Benoit home over that fateful weekend, and why Chris Benoit opened bank accounts in his ex-wife's name and his sister's name and deposited hundreds of thousands of dollars into those bank accounts. Dr. Austin, Benoit's doctor, prescribed Chris Benoit a year's worth of steroids, testosterone, and painkillers every month for 9 months. That's 9 years worth of prescription drugs. Wow, if that's true, I mean, that's really mind-shocking, because would the WWE know about it? Like, if they were, I mean, I don't know, they were making a lot of money, right? Did they really need to have some of these side drug businesses? I mean, maybe. So if they knew about it and possibly were complicit in some way, they wanted to make it all go away. Okay, so who's ready for the biggest mind shock? Actually, one more. Let me go over one more comment before I get to the this testimony. The real Dustin Nunn posted, one of the creepiest things about the Benoit family tragedy case. Who sent those text messages from Chris and Nancy Benoit's cell phones to Chavo Guerrero Jr. and Scott Armstrong's cell phones? How can you hang yourself with a weight machine? How is that possible? The knife under Daniel Benoit's bed, whose knife is it? Who does it belong to? How did it get under Daniel's bed? And the knife was never examined for fingerprints and blood by the Fayette County Police. The mysterious wiki entry talking about Chris, Nancy, and Daniel's deaths. Who wrote that article? Does CTE really cause athletes and professional wrestlers to commit murder? And last but not least, who killed Chris, Nancy, and Daniel? Who did it and why? The 2007 Benoit family tragedy case needs to be reopened. The cell phone activity is definitely huge question marks there. Wow, here's a comment from Speed Champ. Vince McMahon kicked off the PG era right after Benoit's death, and the whole wrestling world changed drastically. Just like how after Aaliyah died, Beyonce took over, and her Freemason husband Jay-Z. Be cautious. Every time someone wants to kick off a new era right after a controversial death. It's an interesting comment, Speed Champ. I don't know how much has been discussed in that direction. That is pretty weird. Huh. Yeah, I need to do a podcast on Aaliyah. Some major questions there. Home Truth's Homie posted, I would much rather be a conspiracy theorist than a coincidence theorist. So many people who accept the mainstream official narrative as gospel truth are coincidence theorist NPCs, period. The truth often lays somewhere in the middle, and that is a good rule of thumb for me. That's actually a middle ground fallacy, but again, let's keep the fallacy in mind. That doesn't mean it's untrue just because it is a middle ground fallacy, because the truth is whatever it is. It might be on either extreme, or it might not. There were people who did not like Benoit, and we know that from his partner's ex, who were also wrestlers. Vince McMahon is a Freemason too, And the WWE reflect this in their logo, which is the 33 when turned 90 degrees. Out of memory, I think those X's were known Satanists, so I find it interesting that Benoit left Bibles next to his wife and child. This was a religious reference that could be related to the X's being Satanist and somehow involved. KS, I think the initials are, of one of the X's ex-wrestlers and love rival to Benoit, Kevin Sullivan. Another thought I had is if they wanted to kill his wife and child in front of him to make him suffer, and he was free for whatever portion of time after, or maybe if they killed his wife and child, did he actually kill himself while not killing them? But either way, did he place the Bibles there because there was some kind of satanic occult activity? And he wanted to make sure their souls were clean or something to that effect. So was he the one who placed the Bibles if there was some kind of satanic occult activity prior involved in their deaths? PGO Gaming posted this theory, which I don't know if I've seen this one before. I do not trust Chavo Guerrero. I did initially, and I felt that he was an innocent bystander to two murders, Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit. The more I thought about it, the more I am convinced that Chavo was involved in both murders. He is the only man around both of them at the time and is alive. Whether he was involved or he simply knew, Chavo is not to be trusted. And another curious question, if they were tying up loose ends, so to speak, why are some of these other people still alive? Unless they really don't know anything. Warrior stated, I was just going to say that Chavo and Ray know something. Yeah, I mean, even if they're not involved, they might know something. Okay, so let's get to this major mind shock. The number one mind shock that we are here for. So this was posted recently by White Rider Graham Cracker. Wanna hear your story? In 2019, I was at a wedding in Atlanta for my cousin. His best man, his name was Stefan. Work at the gym that Chris Benoit went to just outside Atlanta for over 2 years. He told me they became pretty good friends. He was even at Chris's wedding. He showed me pictures. Anyway, long story short, he said for about 10 months before this happened that Chris was convinced Nancy was having an affair with his neighbor and multiple men that would frequent her home. He asked Stefan if he would drive by his house a few times a week while he was on the road. Buddy said he agreed, and no lie on my kids, told me that he drove for about 3 months off and on, and the last time about 3 weeks before the murder. On the last 2 times he drove by, he noticed a moving truck parked on the road in between the neighbors and the Benoits with Florida tags. He said the first time he seen it, he drove to the end of the street, which is a dead end. On passing by the truck again on his way out, he noticed someone getting out of the back of the moving truck, and it was Nancy and 3 men. He didn't have Benoit's new cell number, so he couldn't tell him the next day he drove by again after work, and the truck was still there, but parked a little further up the road, but now it had Atlanta plates on it. He said he wrote down the plate number and was going to give it to Chris next time he seen him at the gym. The week Chris got back, this guy had a bodybuilding contest, I forget where, but out of town. He never got to tell Chris. He said he notified the police as soon as he found out about the murders, and they took all the info and said they would be in contact. They never were. He called back about 30 days later, and they informed him that the case had been quickly closed. He said he knows without a doubt Nancy was in on the murders. She was going to kill Chris and the kid, but something went wrong. He said Chris's old neighbor had a restraining order on him for him asking her the question when she went to the gym. Funny thing is, she never went to that gym until Chris was dead. He thinks she made him when he was driving by the Benoit's house, and she found out who he was and wanted to see if he knew anything about the crime. He said the name on the moving truck was Tiger's Moving Corp. He said he has Googled that name for years. Nothing ever comes up. I honestly believe his story. Okay, what does everybody make of this? I'm going to have to dissect this in 2 pieces because that was pretty mind-shocking. I mean, that might unravel the entire case. Yeah, I can't find a Tiger Moving Corporation. Is that like a fake company? I mean, maybe there's Tiger Movers or Tiger Moving. There's a whole bunch of those, but not with C-O-R-P that I can find. Okay, so let's dissect this. So 2 different things. First of all, which neighbor is he talking about? Is he talking about Holly? Or is he talking about another neighbor? Because that's kind of important information. If he's talking about Holly, I mean, a lot of murders involve love triangles, cheating spouses, etc. So that could theoretically make sense if there was some of that involved. Or was, like, the moving truck, was Nancy planning on moving and taking Daniel with her? Because that would open up a can of worms. I don't think anybody would be happy about that, particularly Benoit. So, and regardless of whether she was or wasn't having some kind of an affair. Or is there something far darker going on where these people associated with the moving company aren't a real moving company? And so they're there multiple times, including a few weeks before. But what about the day of? So again, the neighbor. So the neighbor does apparently have wild parties and a criminal record because of that. But is this the same neighbor that this guy's talking about? Now, separately, I don't know if I've seen the theory that Nancy wanted to kill Benoit. Oh man, that's tough. That's tough. Why would Nancy, if this is true that Nancy told other friends or family that they were indeed being followed, would she say that if she was planning to kill him and employing these shady people with fake moving companies to do so? Because that would bring more attention to people in the neighborhood. So, I don't know, that's a tough one to rectify unless that's not true. Also, is it realistic? I mean, if Stefan was this huge fan of Benoit, He's driving by the house a few times a week? That's kind of a lot just to do a favor for a friend who might be cheating with a neighbor. I mean, I don't know how close these guys were. Unless he's just like the biggest Benoit fan and he's willing to do anything for Benoit. Why does Stefan, so according to white writer Graham Cracker, it says here Stefan knows without a doubt that Nancy was in on the murders and she was going to kill Chris and the kid, but something went wrong. How does he know that? I mean, you would need more information. He said Chris's old neighbor had a restraining order on him. Okay, so a neighbor that no longer lived there? Is that what's going on here? I mean, this is, if white writer Graham Cracker can respond again to clear these things up. Because, yeah, I mean, wow. But this would corroborate, like, if Benoit thought he was being followed, if there's some kind of fake moving company doing some kind of surveillance on the home, if it's one of these darker theories, I mean, was Benoit not simply aware and not paranoid, or both aware and paranoid and he really was being followed? Like, what's really going on? Warrior posted, "You never know, setting up Chris to get killed while in car with him. Typical Tupac Suge Knight type stuff." Shake my head. I mean, I don't know. Is it possible if there's more than one thing going on here? Like, if Nancy did want something, either to leave, to kill him, whatever, if she's also involved with Kevin Sullivan or cohorts of his, either knowingly or unknowingly, like if she's hiring people to do this, do they have other plans and they're also planning to kill her and she doesn't know about it? Was this some kind of weird crisscross criminal situation where everything went wrong? Iwo Gina posted, "I was never more shook by this testimony from this poster." R1, there is a Charles Manson episode coming. Yeah, Iwo Gina, that's why I did this whole episode, because when I saw that comment, because apparently what's rumored is that both Chris and Nancy had said they felt they were being followed. So, coupled with this information about a possibly fake moving company, this is creepy. I mean, I don't know if I would jumble in Nancy wants him dead. I don't know about that. I don't know where he got that information from. But if we disregard that for a second, if this additional testimony of fake moving companies and random men coming and going, that is really creepy. It's like a Men in Black situation or something. But again, even people that are paranoid or, like, not in this case, drug addicts, whatever, there's no magical Dungeons and Dragons spell that protects people from being harmed by bad actors. Like, he's this famous person. It's not impossible that there are people following him or keeping tabs. Even if it was just, let's say, a private investigator hired by Nancy to find out if he was cheating or whatever, there could have been somebody following Benoit. We obviously don't know if that's true, but it's not out of the realm of possibility that people were following Benoit. I mean, the WWE, especially if they're planning on making Benoit a champion or whatever, a lot of big companies much smaller than the WWE, they hire PIs to kind of keep track of some of their assets, so to speak, especially if they think they might be involved in shady dealings or whatever. So it's not an impossibility that people were actually following Benoit. So that's really what I wanted to go over for this episode. There's actually plenty more. I'll be doing another episode. So, yeah, what does everybody think so far to close this out? I mean, that was really creepy. It would be interesting to know if this guy would be willing to go on record and what other information he has. Because if this guy really was driving by the house multiple times per week, but he only saw the moving truck the last 2 times. And so apparently he said it was the same truck, but the second time it had different tags. That is pretty creepy. That's pretty creepy. And then the old neighbor with the restraining order. That seems to be an avenue of investigation that shouldn't be overlooked either. So that's it for this one. I mean, we'll be going over more coincidences and anomalies regarding other pro wrestlers as well, even more Kevin Sullivan situations. Yeah, this is a tough one. I really don't know how coincidence theorists write it off this quickly, because it's not like a full investigation was done. There were all these DNA tests, all the cell phone forensics were all added up perfectly. There was no funny business with the neighbor. I mean, if this was a completely different situation, you could kind of say, okay, it appears to have happened as reported, but there's so many issues and problems here, so I don't know if people can actually say that. But again, thanks to all the MindShock listeners listening. Hope everybody enjoyed another edition of the MindShock podcast. Found it interesting and informative. If you want to help support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Help support the channel that way. Make sure you're subscribed, like and share. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comments section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.